really, the highlight of the slide and what the talking point really is you're well aware these are not recurring. This is not a recurring fund. So that $29 million is not going to be received by the district next year, the year after, or any time in the future year. So, the board's well aware of kind of maintaining that cost structure, being aware of budgeting out for future years, with the understanding that these funds are no longer coming into the district. This is especially important.
Yeah, and again, just a reminder, that's cumulative, so that was 2020 through 2024, so 5 years.
We check controls for $34.
I have the $34.
Yeah.
Still meant.
Oh,
That's 34,000.
Oh, $34.
Okay, but not sorry.
It's still not very much.
It's not-
It's still, there's after 29 million spent, it's in the check.
Yeah, and most of that, I think, is that commercially requirement, that's, I think, it's not there, it's not, it's as a future.
Great work. Yep.
So just a couple, just want to kind of break out the different governmental funds for the school district. So it shows revenue and expenditures and fund balance as of June 30, 2024. Broken out by the two major funds for the district as well as the non-major funds there on the right. The general fund being obviously the main operating fund for the district, and that's going to be really the focus of the rest of the slides here. But ultimately, just to summarize there, the district added about $4.1 million in fund balance. They had 90 fund balance in June 30, 2024, with about $36.7 million. The other major fund this year was the 2023 capital projects fund. So that fund's able to receive that first series of that significant bond that was passed in 2023. So ultimately, that fund, you see about $20.9 million of expenditures on some of those bond-related projects that were by the voters. But then to get to an ending fund balance, about $170 million. The total non-major funds, that consists of the special revenue funds, your food service fund, preschool fund, those type of funds, your special revenue funds. That service funds paid out some of the obligations, and then some of the other capital non-major capital projects funds, which are between 19 capital projects and sinking funds. So that's kind of the rest of the funds there on the right hand side there came in with any fund balance for those funds just under $15 million.
Yeah, and again, the 2019 capital project fund was presented as non-major. And again, these are as of June 30th, 2024. There was just over $1 million of fund balance left in the 2019 fund.
Was that $1.5 million intended to be spent on that fund?
The non-major debt, so that's the cumulative of a lot of different funds. That's your debt service funds, your non-major capital project funds. You also have several special revenue funds. So there's a lot going on in that non-major column. So there's some funds that did have an increase in fund balance, and other had a decrease. I think some of that too is part of that service that can fluctuate quite a bit in terms of the revenues coming in through the debt millage and then scheduled principal and interest payments. So it's very common you can have a decrease in fund balance in any given year. So
Yeah, it just depends on the total tax receipts for the year relative to the schedule of payments due. But then, yes, food service is included in there as well, so we're probably seeing some of that spend down plan, which.
That's what I was gonna say, I knew that some of it was a spend, some just in case some of that.
Yeah, we do have a solid spend down plan where, as of today, we are set to spend down what is required to be spent down during this fiscal year.
Yeah, so your reduction, or actually you did increase actually in fund balance in the food service fund for 2024. They actually
Troy and every other district in the state.
correct. I think every district's gonna spend on that.
Yeah.
And then for the, I know it was in the reports, it doesn't seem to be maybe in this particular slide deck, but the general fund, that fund balance that we had at the end of the year, that's about 10 weeks of profit.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, it's,
Yeah,
okay, I
yeah,
didn't see
yeah.
it.
Yep.
Okay.
It's we'll look into it. There's a small little piece on one side, so it's doesn't jump right off the page. So getting into general fund revenue, this slide just breaks out total revenue by funding or by the different funding sources. So total revenue came in just under $195 million at June 30, 2024. The largest component of that piece is your state source revenue, coming in just under $130 million, or 67% of total general fund revenue. That consists of the foundation allowance set by the state, other categoricals. You'll see the significance of the foundation allowance on the next slide. And that also includes, in that bucket, is that 147C revenue that we talked about that typically that's the revenue the state sets aside to basically pay down retirement costs for district employees. So the district gets that in at $17.1 million of revenue, and then turns around and it's $17.1 million of expenditure going to the officer retirement system. So no impact on fund balance for that, but certainly a significant source.
Quick question, the 23%, is that 18% non-homestead that just passed, as well as the corn harvest? So
Yes,
that's
18
the-
mills plus the.
18.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the 23%.
Yeah, and your millage
Most
rate
of
for whole harmless, 2024 was 2.78. That can fluctuate each year because it's a set dollar amount per student, so it's always kind of, it's calculated each year based on property tax values and how many students you have. And it's really quick too to note on here, so the 8.2 million of the federal general fund, about 4 million of that was ESSER this year, so that number, is assuming all the numbers were equal for 2025, that will go down by about half for next year.
Okay, the next slide here takes that same general fund revenue bucket and just breaks out a little bit differently, just to show the impact and significance of foundation funds set by the state. So it's about 45% of total revenue, state source revenue there. Also, the property tax revenue that's at those 18 mills there, the harmless fund, about 21%. So it's included in that local source bucket on the prior slide. The other state local source revenue, 30%, those are those other categoricals, the 147C revenue, and those type of items included in that orange bucket. And then, as Chris mentioned, $8.2 million of federal source revenue as well. So just kind of that same revenue pie just split out just to show the significance of that foundation.
Yeah, and then just really quick too, the breakout for the property tax is about 9.1 million of that was whole harmless, and the balance would be your 18 mills for the operating fund.
So 9.1 of the 40 is whole harvest.
Yeah.
And at 45%, we'll talk a little bit more on the later slide on kind of the foundation allowance and some of the trends there for the district as well as
And you'll probably remember some of the campaign material that we had out regarding the villages that just passed was around 42 million. So that was that projected amount in the future if we would lose it. Yeah.
And just setting back for 1 minute to the question on the reduction of the non-major fund. So, because we didn't talk about the sinking fund did use quite a bit of fund balance for 2024, so that was about 1.8 million use of fund balance this year, so that's something really good.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, the next two slides we'll shift gears and look at general fund balance, total expenditures of the general fund. Total expenditures came in at about $191 million for the year ending June 30, 2024. This first slide breaks it out by object, and really looking at kind of where those resources are being spent. So as you're used to seeing, and certainly 80% of that goes to district employees. Salaries, wages, and benefits are included in that $154 million number of total general fund expenditures. The next largest component is that purchase services at about 50%. So the district, that would also include some contract workers, substitute teachers, custodians, that also are baked in at 50%. So really, when you kind of combine the two, you're looking at a very significant percentage that's going to people costs.
And that's, so that was over 13 years, so that was like 2%, that's 75%, so we're less and less money to do anything else.
Yeah, included in that 153 million, again, the benefits that Michael mentioned as well, about 40 million of that alone is just the military contribution, so that's a good number.
Is the projection that that number keeps going up?
Yeah, so it is gonna tick down a little So that will go down next year, but still the normal costs will continue to go up. So that could over time tick back up and, you know, keep where you're at.
I was gonna say, you might be a little optimistic, I don't think
It's gonna be a short
percentage.
It'll be a short term, yeah.
And that's the goal, you guys, to keep that increase going.
Keep that coming from the legislature.
So this slide just takes that same expenditure, bucket and breaks it out by function, as defined by state efficiency. So really looking at like the fundamental view. So the largest component there, that teal bucket at 65% is direct instruction. So resources directly in the classroom, so most of your teachers in that bucket. Indirect instruction makes up the next largest percentage at about 13.7%. Those are, you know, librarians, counselors, things of that nature that surround the classroom. So you kind of combine the two of those, you're looking at about 80% of total expenditures is related to direct or indirect instruction. Just for comparison purposes, as kind of a benchmark there, we have at the top of the slide there, you see that 60%. That's the from the average for direct instruction. It's a year behind, obviously, we don't have all the numbers yet to figure out the 24 number.
It never changes, and our number
Yeah.
never changes, so it
Correct.
doesn't matter.
Correct, so, you know, certainly Troy's, 5%.
We're always 5% above Oakland
Yep.
Valley.
Yep, and, you know, when you really,
That administration, 400%.
really when you look at the different buckets and the percentages, really consistent in the last couple of years, no real major changes here.
Quick question, the people transportation, is that like the bus drivers? I thought, so that's not purchase services?
This is a different,
way of
correct.
looking at this.
So-
It falls under, that's function 271, is
Okay.
is people transportation. Within the function, you can have a purchase service.
So this is a combination of everything. All of
It's the same as the previous one, it's just restating and looking at different.
Think of it function level, and then how do we spend the dollars within the function is the object classification.
Thank you.
So, wanted to just highlight kind of the trend here of people membership and then the foundation allowance set by the state for the last couple of years. I think this presentation is consistent with what we've done the last couple of years. But, really when we start, if you kind of start left to right, the bar graphs represent the enrollment numbers, and then the line graph there is the foundation allowance set by the state. Starting in 0809, there's very significant funding across the state of Michigan. So we showed that just for kind of reference purposes, just to see that, it took until 2019, 2020 to basically catch back up to what that foundation allowance was back in 0809. And then, since that time, and really starting in 2020, 21, through 23, 24, you started to see uptakes in that foundation allowance across the state for, so Troy at the end of 23, 24, that foundation allowance was $10,354 per student, and that's expected, that amount is expected to continue.
But that doesn't reflect Mr.'s kickback.
Yeah, the 147.84.
Yeah, so our
So the
effective-
deal was for 24, and no foundation, or 25, no foundation allowance increase. But on average.
So the
that
chart's a little
foundation is-
deceiving because we did get more funding,
Yeah,
effective funding.
approximately $400 per student
Right.
is the calculated statewide average. Every district will be a little lower, or a little higher.
Yeah, I was hoping I'd know what that number was in this report, so,
Yeah.
because I knew that's often here is the average, but we had been estimating somewhere around 4% increase in that, but I was curious what it turned out to be. We had.
Yeah,
Is there
we-
one specific house?
We were in the 500 range.
I won't be here for that.
More.
Yeah,
Because we have a higher.
Yeah.
Direct instruction, payroll, and in all kinds of order. So we were in the 550 range. There was an estimate I saw in July or August.
$550.
Yeah, I was trying to find it over during our budget or earlier tonight to find the use case.
And, the last few years, we had this exact same chart, adjusted inflation also, so that it helps us understand that we still didn't get back to the level.
So 5.3%.
So
So for us, that was a 5.3% increase we got this year.
Yeah, and so today, actually, the November state aid post, we can finally see that it was about $5.1 million for that specific category.
But I just want to, everybody understands that we actually we saw a 5.3% increase this year. Broad inflation, it's really exciting.
Your work payout.
Yeah, the only other thing I was gonna highlight on this slide, just from an enrollment perspective, is in 2021, this is a reminder, we had kind of that super blind formula set by the state. The state knew that enrollment was gonna be down across the state pandemic, so they based, that funding, that flat basically enrollment on pre-pandemic levels to, offset that. So just as a reminder, in 2021, you don't really see the decline, but you kind of see a sharp decline in 2022, because that's really the effect of the 2 years of that.
Yeah, I mean, in this slide, the lead time we see would be on trend with what we're seeing in all districts statewide. You can see the decline in the student population base. I know it's a nationwide thing too, is our overall this nationwide population has age, we have a lower growth rate too, so that's a trend we continue to see.
Just quickly wanted to show Troy as a foundation, allowance perspective in comparison to the, some other Oakland County districts, for 23-24. So kind of in the $10,391 per pupil, kind of right in the middle there, of some fewer Oakland County districts. If you look at the Grand Valley's Waterford, it's kind of at the floor. That 9,608 is the floor set by the state. They saw about a $458 per pupil increase. And that, towards the time, you see the blue is equipment payments in excess of $13,000 per student. So, Troy's just kind of right in the middle there. It's kind of
Yeah, and anything over the 9608 are public harmless districts, so if you take their total less than 9608, that's how much they're collecting per student in those harmless laws.
And then the next, the last slide that we have tonight is a lot of information here, but really just wanted to kind of show the 10-year trend of the bar graph there of fund balance within the general fund, as well as the line graph there kind of shows that fund balance is percentage of expenditures and certainly kind of measured used across the state. And, over that 10-year period, Troy's number below $20 million in fund balance has never been below 50%. Fund balance is percent of expenditure, so certainly see that fiscal stability over that 10-year period, despite a lot of things going on within the K-12 funding environment. Just wanted to, looking at it from 21 to 2024 here, you can see some uptick in fund balance. That's consistent with what we're seeing across the state. A lot of districts are benefiting from those ESSER dollars, those non-funded dollars. So from a statewide average, we're up still kind of a year behind, but that fund balance as a percentage of expenditure statewide for fiscal year 2023 was about 21.86%, which was an increase from 2022 of about 20.3%. So kind of seeing that trend across the state for increases in fund balance.
We're still below the state average.
Correct. Yeah, just slightly below in terms of that fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, and then the weeks of operation. So that's another metric, just kind of looking at, okay, if funding dried up and based on our current cost structure, how long can we operate without additional funding resources? And so that's 9 weeks or 70 days for Troy as of June 30, 2024. Again, that statewide average is 7 weeks.
But if you, the one-time money that we got from Masters, if you remove that $4 million from this, we are at 17%. So, we took advantage of that one time. We wouldn't need it next year, so.
And you could even do that going a couple of years, the last couple of years, and see something similar. So and even it would be interesting to see from a statewide perspective how much of those ESSER funds are really contributing to that increase that we've seen over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and of the $4 million we mentioned, $3.4 million of that was spent on payroll, which is a big portion of that too. If you look at that from a balance perspective, where the money is spent.
And we will need that for next year.
Right.
Dan, what do you anticipate the new teacher contract will be implemented?
So when we looked at just some of the additional categoricals, looking at right now, that's why we're prioritizing kind of an amendment in December,
Yeah.
as opposed to carryover, I think, built into the budget from some of these other grants too.
Right.
So like this year, we have 31 double rate money, a little over $3 million. That's a mental health focused grant, so that covers your nurses, your psychs. And so you can strategically use that to bridge this gap of the lost semester funds. So, and then equally fund balance. I mean, there was talk in fiscal year 21, going into that budget year at the state level of districts using their fund balance because districts' fund balances were getting fairly high compared to historical figures, and they said, well, why don't we tap into that prior to the feds coming in with $8 trillion worth of funding? So I think it's fair to say that a lot of districts are going to rely on those higher fund balances to bridge this gap.
But that's a plus.
No, I think we'll be in a stable position between attrition, reassessing specific positions if we have to reallocate it to a different department, maybe shifting something over to special ed to accommodate a need there, or just through attrition and then just evaluating that position and do we truly need it? If we do, great, let's try to keep it. Maybe there's another grant opportunity out there that we can be very specific with.
So for these guys, we should anticipate a significant drop in fund balance in 25.
Michael, that was good making it.
That percentage.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Yeah, and then just remember too, the board, it's included in your financial statements, but the board has a policy of maintaining at least a minimum of 50%.
Right.
fund balance.
That's what I was asking, because it looks like we're comfortably above that, but I want to see if your face paled out or not. Not yet.
Yeah, the funding, I think, came in above what Rick had budgeted back in June. So for us, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And then just being proactive in budgeting going forward.
Yeah, I think he set budget based on the governor's recommendation.
We lost about 15 FTE this year. We shed about 15 FTE, which was our goal, at least 15, so we get that. And to Dan's point, we'll continue to look at each position as it comes open, determine whether it's needed, and or should it be allocated differently. So each of those is being evaluated at a cabinet level.
And that's kind of the trend with the state right now. You probably have these ESSER funds. Districts have discretion of how are you going to utilize it best for your community. Coming out of that era, you've seen more specific grants now to 31 AA, which is stemmed off of the at-risk grant funding, but it was specific to mental health, safety, and security. They keep narrowing the focus to even more specific causes. So that's where we can look at what position do we have potentially open, and then how can we utilize a specific grant. Yeah. So
Is that the fund where we put a stipulation that you cannot hire people with that fund? The special, the 31A, does the security or the safety and?
yeah, there was different. So it started out with Section 97 monies was all security focused. It was mapping of buildings, security upgrades, security assessments, things like that. And then they kind of looped that language into the 31 AA language, and they said you have to spend 50-50 between the two categories. And then now it's evolved a little more to where it's not really supposed to be security anymore. They want mental health focus.
Okay.
So
And they removed that, cannot hire any personnel to do that then?
for mental health,
Yeah, for that fund.
you can hire individuals with it. Yeah. So that's our goal with the carryover is to maintain a lot of the positions that were added, primarily social workers, psychologists. Yeah.
Any questions, other questions for this? Thank you.
See you next week.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
One last question.
Yeah.
You mentioned there's additional rules this time for the audit.
Yeah.
Did that create any concerns or?
No, so like I mentioned, that new standard was an audit standard, it's not an accounting standard. We were talking about changes in how they account for things, but this was a change in the audit standard, so it required auditors to dive a little deeper into internal controls and the grants in your accounting cycle. So we did not identify any issues, we not sure weaknesses, or some efficiencies. So I think that this says a lot too. Everybody had some turnover obviously in the business office this year, especially toward the end of the year. But there were no lapses in internal controls because of that. And Dan and the rest of his team did a great job in preparing for the audit and being able to properly with that change that you had in the business office near your end. So it's still a great.
understand for a layperson, it's what you look at that's changed, not what
Correct,
our
we have to do
financial
more work
services
to
does.
get deeper into your internal controls, but nothing new that you have.
Right, or just more documentation, more questions that they have, that they get to answer.
Yeah, and I will say, Rel, Valentin, he came from Birmingham, our finance director, he did an incredible job. It's not easy coming in the middle of the summer, let alone in the middle of an audit, let alone coming out of ESSER funding where you have $29 million in expenditures, so, I know he worked incredibly hard to kind of navigate through some of this, learning the systems and working with them, and I know they were a great resource as well, by Grant, to provide some of the insight,
And we did have a number of districts that historically have not had findings, that because of this new standard and having to look deeper, that we did have findings in outlying districts where historically we had not been. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Okay, 2B, other replacements. Yeah, good size. Yeah. That's the.
We need those chicken nuggets cooked first.
Those combios. Yeah.
Drier than normal.
So this is in line with our spend down plan for the food service fund. So Gail and Nicole have kind of gone around the district and created a plan of minor kitchen equipment upgrades. So here you can see Bill, Leonard, and Troy Union, all same type of ovens and serving the same type of student population. So Gail went out and got a few different prices, but yeah, again, pretty standard upgrade. We've done quite a few now, so we're going to continue to start investing these excess fund balance dollars into the kitchens just to make sure that we keep up with the demand for meals. So it's a good problem to have.
And how much should we have to spend down?
$2 billion.
I think after a lot of this, we're in like $700,000 range.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's still a lot, yeah.
But she's got a plan.
Can we use it for better food?
Yes,
You can.
you absolutely
I'd
can.
ask.
Quick question.
I'd ask Rich to give us a timeline on food, yeah.
Did this estimate part, is that new? I don't remember seeing estimates before.
That I think is just probably internal planning. So what you have to do is you have to go into a state system, list out budget items for a spend down plan, and you have to plug in a number. So some of it's just the best guess.
It's what we hope to spend? or what we
Yeah.
get? Okay.
Yeah. So,
Any other questions on this? We're good there? Landscape.
So this one is the one that we had talked about, so again, we had talked about, just awarding this contract to the contractor. They've kind of been waiting, we've awarded everything else, but this one is a lot of the heavy lifting, if you will. We haven't decided on specific plantings or anything like that, but there's no irrigation included in this bid. A lot of the plantings are maintenance friendly, if you will. So we do have time before we pick the specifics of it. And you can still tailor some things a little bit here and there, but they wanted to get the bulk of it awarded to this contractor, since we did bid it out.
That's like your foundational.
Yeah, yeah, so it's a little bit more of a site work component to it, but again, it's a very minimalistic design that if we do sell this section one property and do receive funds for that, then perhaps we can supplement some of this and get around the district.
Some of those have to show.
Does this budget include, I know we haven't picked the plans and all those things, but does this budget include that?
Include the plants.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's just because you're 2 years out, you
Yeah.
haven't actually gone to the nursery yet, said we want those ones. I mean, they have a general sense of which species,
Yeah.
just based on maintenance needs, but you still have time where if you want, they would just give you the allowance and say, yeah, go ahead.
I guess my more specific question is, in terms of landscaping, this should be it,
Mhm. Yeah.
in terms of budget.
I actually did have a question. I think last time we
No,
No.
this is more site work type landscape.
big stuff?
Yeah, it's the bigger stuff, so there's opportunity, I think, to add those things later on if you choose to. So this is really just creating
It's
the
the foundational
walkways and the
work.
soil, you know, kind of grading the ground, just to
Flat
make it a nice smooth,
benches, things like that, you know, that are part of the site work itself.
So it is a very minimalistic with the opportunity to add in the future as we
Additional
go.
cost for that.
Yeah, there, none of that you're referring to is actually included in this type of work. So this is really.
That's where-
And I would
that's where the
necessarily
proceeds
do it
from-
anyways, because
Yeah.
there was a garden at my kids' elementary school, and it lasted only as long as there was a parent who was willing
I know.
to do
No,
it.
but if
Same
you
thing
wanted
as
to do
Larson.
natural landscapes, the grasscapes,
She was
things like
talking about
that.
planting
Yeah,
food.
but I was saying
Food
anything
is-
like that is, this is basically, it's on top of that. So this is the basic layout, and then if you wanted to add something, that's where the funds from section one could come in, if you guys wanted to
Enhance it a little bit.
enhance it, you could use that to the $2 million coming out of that. for those sorts of things.
When does irrigation fit in with the landscape? Is that
It's
after
not
or
lazy.
never at all?
They never input any because the type of plantings they tentatively selected for species don't require the water.
Will rainwater be recovered from the roof?
That's where we could enhance some of this if we wanted to, but nothing with respect to irrigation is included, so.
I don't have irrigation now.
In very few areas.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Our job is going to
Keep it dry. Yeah.
It's not going to be finding water. Yeah. It's going to be keeping the water away.
Gary, there are, I think, opportunities to add those types of things. This is really just trying to honor the bid and the design work more from a site work perspective.
To lock it in now?
Yeah.
So this is just grading, putting dirt on it, and
Yeah,
putting
for
some
ours.
flat books.
Yeah.
There's not even grass.
Plants.
Yeah, there's a few areas of just seeded areas of grass.
You say grass areas, first designated grass areas.
The plants,
Yep.
which is real with plants.
Any other questions on this one?
So at that time, we
Good
could
there.
start working. on the design.
Benches are part of this too, hardscapes and designated benches.
Yeah, they just have, the architects have some benches strategically located, like shoes or anything like that.
2D roof replacement?
So this one is just the standard roofing program. Robin did some bid openings a couple weeks ago, so you'll see Baker, Troy Union, and Services Building. There's just some sections on there. Strategically, like to do sections of buildings throughout the district rather than the entire building.
This is part of our ongoing
Yep, through the
maintenance
sinking
plan.
fund, yep. Yep, so the sinking fund.
What's the benefit of doing sections of a roof as opposed to?
Then you don't have to worry about replacing an entire roof and having a larger problem in the building, as opposed to if it's just sections. Especially in high school, you typically have 20 to 30 different sections of that building that you're constantly doing.
And this stuff is just sort of normal cadence of.
Yeah, so sinking fund generally covers a good chunk of it.
We added, like, 8 years ago, we added a roof replacement plan, and we have a company that basically looks at the 2 million square feet of roof, and then they have it mapped out every year. Because before that, it was like, oh, we're leaking again, and it's, we really have not.
So less reactionary.
Yeah, it's good preventative maintenance, and I'll tell you, it's worked, like, we really haven't
My
had
first
the
year on
leaks.
the board, there were so many leaks.
Yeah.
And it's,
That problem seems to be fixed, so the plan seems to work, but definitely like my first 5 years on the board, it was always, which classrooms are being rained on, you know, so it's nice to see the plan working.
Yes, Carl's referencing the roof asset management plan, that's Rob put that in place when we got here, and that's what we've been following. And we've been fortunate to be able to utilize, in most cases, we utilize fund dollars.
Yeah, larger projects like a paving project, typically go under the bond just because it's, you would wipe out your sinking fund to projects. So, we do have a similar type of plan for pavement as well. And then I know Rob, is working with a couple things right now, just some HVAC planning. You know,
Yeah, Ron's
specifically at Troy
he's been a
High.
master at preventive maintenance, like, I just think since he's been on board, we don't see failures anymore. It's like the cadence of replacement is working well, and not just roofs, but he's
He
very
feels
good at
behind
it.
a lot, but it's because
He
he's
was.
constantly running around, so he's doing a great job with it.
Not this particular thing, but you mentioned HVAC.
Mm-hmm.
When we were at MASB, Teresa was going understand, how it would function, but, is that something that we've utilized?
We have been fortunate enough to have a sinking fund and then now this bond to where you don't need to go that route. You can, and districts that don't have a sinking fund or a bond fund can do that.
Okay.
And in essence, what it is the state has a formula that you have to look at to where they say, okay, you can borrow without voter approval X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
And then you simply just go through, but it's only for very specific
For
uses.
energy efficient.
And energy is one of them.
Yeah, okay.
So we have been lucky enough to not have to go
So we
down that
could,
road,
if
but,
we,
yeah.
if for some reason we wanted to or needed to, but we just haven't had a need to do it. Okay. See, you answered what I looked at, so that was.
Any other questions on the roof replacements? We'll kick it down. Okay, we move to infrastructure upgrades. This is the servers.
Is this part of the roof replacement?
Part of it.
Part of fixing the
Yes. Yes.
So you'll see here, it's just over $440,000. So I tried to pick the best ones I could when I met with Troy to go over.
We're gonna ask a lot of very technical questions. I have here prepared.
Well, here you go. So it's kind of twofold right now. So we have a server problem and then we have a backup problem. So right now our backup solution is here at the top is the Dell Integrated Data Protection Appliance. So that's the current solution that does not offer any cloud backup option right now. And so one of the goals with Troy, our IT director, Troy Singh, was to have some redundancy in our backup procedures. In this case, having cloud. So right now, we only have one off-site backup location at Troy High. And the issue, and more recently, the issue was the print server failed. In order to restore that, they had to access the backup over at Troy High. It's not very easily accessible to the point where they're almost having to just rebuild it based on little scraps that they can find from that backup. So that leads to then having a third party come out, try to do it for us, and they're the only ones that will help do it. So what was on the proposal was switching to this Beam data platform, which is a new backup solution. It's very popular in the school sector. It does offer a cloud backup option, which is good. So we would have localized backups here in the district, but also a cloud backup as well.
I didn't know our offsite wasn't cloud-based.
It's literally just over at Troy High.
And our offsite should not be in our
I'm
own
absolutely
building.
shocked by that.
Right.
Shouldn't be in the same city.
Offsite
Your
should be
tornado
somewhere
comes through,
far.
and it's, yeah.
And so that was a weakness in
Now
our
we're in the
system.
cloud.
Now we're in the cloud.
So that'll have obviously a cloud backup solution. It will utilize the Dell system as the localized backup option as well. So now you have two different backup locations, one in the cloud, one local. And then it's just faster and easier to restore that data. You know, they can literally go in, find it, hit restore, in a few hours, you've restored the server, depending on the size of the server. So that's something that you can have more control in-house with the staff that you have, as opposed to relying on a third party that you're gonna have lead times on.
So, whether you have cloud or localized backup, if the data that's being backed up wasn't good enough to start with, that's why somebody had to come and take crumbs out of the pieces and put it together.
Yep.
Probably still doesn't matter, so I don't know if they're changing the way that they're storing the backup.
Yeah, so that's the server side of it now down here. So right now we use VMware as the virtualization software. VMware was bought out by a larger company called Broadcom.
Yes,
They are slowly pulling out of the school and governmental market. So we have over 100 servers right now, and that supports our storage, that's what supports our printers, our phones, security, access control panels, things like that. They are going to a more corporatized structure to where they want to cater to Fortune 500 companies. So they are, in some cases, we've heard of them tripling other districts' fees.
the price.
Right, so they say, hey, you're up for renewal, this is what it's gonna cost, and now instead of $100,000, it's $300,000. So they're just looking to get out of the space. It's not a good solution anymore for a district. So Scale is the new system, so it's just a much more streamlined, user-friendly, you can handle it within house, it's geared towards schools. It's also cheaper, which is nice. So they're looking to push all of our data onto those So this should fix a lot of the issues that we ran into at the beginning of the year with the server going down and then having issues trying to reconstruct it now.
What's the implementation time?
So if it passes with your approval next week, I think Troy said he could try to get some of them going right around Thanksgiving.
Pretty fast.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's a fairly quick turnaround, so,
Yeah,
Yeah.
2 year lead time.
you know, it's
Yeah,
something that
like
made
switches.
Thanksgiving and Christmas prioritize, and, you know, things like print servers would go first, that way we can rectify that issue. The other issue we ran into was, we have 80% or so of staff that have MacBooks. When Apple upgraded to macOS 15 in the end of October, middle of October, they rewrote the entire code base to the networking protocols, and it doesn't like our systems now. So a Mac user specifically would go on the network, and then within 30 minutes or so, their IP address would time out, and then suddenly they have no access to the network or the printers. So that presented some challenges because you can't just quickly downgrade.
And we're still
your
happy
software.
with the Yale district, okay, all right.
Is it because our print servers and our printers are not at the same as the Macs? So why?
No, it was specific to Wi-Fi. So it was literally related to the code base in the new Mac software. They changed something in the code for Wi-Fi capabilities where it would just, it was a bug of some sort, and it would automatically just release the IP address, and then your computer would sit there with nothing to connect to until you reboot it. So it sounds like they found a good fix, but they're looking at how can we downgrade the software back to the old one. In the meantime, we've given iPads to special ed staff that need a computer or device to be able to do IEPs. So that's kind of been a temporary solution, or giving them a PC laptop. But I know they've escalated this to California through their support, so.
They were on site today. Apple was on site today with their engineer and working with Troy and Alan. And they'll be on site again tomorrow, trying to address this. I have escalated it to people on my side as much as I can. So we're hopeful by the end of the week we have a solution.
This is kind of tangential to this, but any other questions about that purchase?
I do have a question regarding the cloud. Cloud YouTube is a service, so you have to pay every year versus you account for the increased cost of the
Yep.
service as well as the speed of our network connections.
Yeah, so that's where you'll see here, it's the capital projects fund will pay for the physical equipment, and then the general fund covers the software portion of the cloud storage fees.
It's every year, constant.
So we'll, you know, that
He does have the quotes, so we can bring that and then show all the quotes, and you'll get all the detail for that.
That's right. Microsoft has, because we have Microsoft products that we use, right?
Yep.
Copilot, has anyone seen the latest thing with Copilot, where Copilot is now set as default to harvest anything that you write or use inside Microsoft Office? And so they are they're scouring that and pulling, and because we have confidential information for students, and that you have to go into, it's about 6 layers in to Microsoft Office. You can turn that off to prevent them from automatically harvesting our data. So I don't know if anyone could talk to Troy about that, but that is something we want to go through our whole system and shut off. Yeah, when do you think
But
you have
even,
an out
even
for
for
that?
like, I'm gonna look at that from work.
Yeah, no, at my office today, we just went through all of our computers and went down into the system. I can send you the link or where you have to go to do
So they're
it.
just gonna be scouring for proprietary personal.
Just looking for things to
information.
help Copilot get smarter, and it doesn't matter if it's your proprietary information. Yeah, yeah, but you can turn it off, but it's defaults to on. So, yeah, so we just did that, but I thought, as you're sitting here talking, I'm going, oh no, we have a lot of private information. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I will, I'll send it to you as well. Okay, so we're okay, any other questions on that? Okay. All All right, we're okay with that one. Electric buses.
So this one's all grant funded. So we have two electric buses that we're looking to purchase through, Folkstra. So this was the section 74B state grant. So this was a Clean Bus Energy grant offered by MDE. So, there was 3 quotes provided, Folkstra being the lowest. So we are looking to proceed now with ordering those buses, and then
Clean
working with.
$407,000 a bus. Okay. But
The state
that
paid for it.
entire purchase price is covered under the grant, or?
I thought
So
that was.
I thought we had to kick in money out of that.
There will be a small portion, but it would probably be more towards like the chargers.
So my original, when they granted it, it was supposed to be $200,000 per bus that they give, and we cover the rest.
That's what I
Did they
remember
change
also.
it?
There's an EPA grant too that's helping offset some of this cost.
So it's,
Okay.
so it might be 2 grants that we're looking at as
Yeah,
opposed
they
to
kinda
one,
run
because
it.
I remember this also.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's,
I remember
because when I
it.
saw it, I
Yeah.
was like, I just want to make sure we, because one of the things we wanted to make sure is we wanted to be able to look at, you know, what was the installation cost for the infrastructure, and then what do we anticipate the 10-year operating costs will be for the bus in total, so we can look at, because this is one where, before we start willy-nilly going electric, it says the electric car on it. But I think, you know, fiscally, we have to make sure that we're not adding tremendous cost. If it turns out over a 10-year period, it's actually less expensive or equally, then it's okay to spend more upfront. But it sounds like this is virtually
I
all
want to say it was
covered.
around 50 grand is what the district would be paying, which we could use.
Which is
That's
way,
way less.
okay, that's
Okay.
great.
Way less than.
And that covers the infrastructure as well, that's.
Yeah, so DTE has a lot of rebates available for the charger installation. We've partnered with another entity that will help us file some tax credits at the federal level.
Okay.
So they get a small cut of the credit that we receive, and then they just handle all the paperwork. So we can.
What's the size of the buses? Are these like our medium size or are they?
They're full size, they're like 77.
Okay.
So did you talk to Pontiac School District? Because they got a
Put it
grant
into
for
services,
the
so
entire
what it
fleet
does.
to be converted, and they decided to go super slow and only like 5 a year. And they said there were lots of concerns.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah,
this
they
is a
want-
good test. This is
They went through the
fleet.
EPA grant.
Yes.
They were eligible in the first round of that grant, so they had, I want to say 25 or so buses through that, and then another 15 through this grant. And going an entire fleet right now is a little risky in my opinion. So going with 2, I think, for us to trial and maybe some specific runs we can work with. I know Kathy already has a couple of drivers in mind that are willing to learn how to use these and charge them appropriately and that kind of thing. So I think going with 2 is a good starting point,
Mhm.
you know, out of the 65 or so buses.
No, that's great. I just, when I was looking at the proposal today, I was thinking, okay, how much of that are we paying out of pocket, how much is grant?
Yeah, I did the math before. It was like 920 grand total when you factor in chargers and all of that. And then, you know, the grant amount, it was like a $50,000 difference.
But it's still less than buying,
Yeah,
Gas
regular
bus
buses,
anyway,
170,
so,
180,
yeah.
somewhere in there.
Yeah, for a new one, yeah.
so we're still, so we do need the 2 buses, we're changing out 2 buses. And this is still gonna be less expensive than if we were to go with.
Yeah, and you know, the catch 22 with the grant that Pontiac used with the EPA was you have to destroy
Yeah.
the gas bus in order to take,
Oh,
and then
okay.
receive funding for the new one with this grant.
So you keep them in running, the other 2?
So did Haley Stevens end up helping us with this? Did Rob, because that was when we were in DC. She was saying, oh, why didn't you, you could have talked to me when we were turned down before. So I wondered whether we ended up cooperating with her or whether we just got it on our own.
Rick actually partnered with another company when he put in the application. I remember him sending me. Hoekstra, okay, yeah.
Okay.
Hoekstra helped us.
Yeah, and Colchester is very close with DTE too. You know, they presented at the Open IC on electric buses and the plans and strategies for operating and all of that.
So is Hoekstra very local? Because whenever I went to any of these Google conferences and whenever there's a bus, electric bus presentations, Hoekstra is never in it. It's more, what is the Highland and a couple of other companies that were
it's.
Can we hold that till
so-
other?
Okay, yeah, that's right. Yep.
We talked about that.
Okay, any other questions on it? I just want to get it, or anything else on the electric company?
Nope.
Because I want to talk about it another too, so. Okay, all right. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, saved it all for this month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Working on the side. Okay, we need to teaching and learning updates.
What?
Yeah, Chris is on it.
A little bit break?
Yeah,
Sure.
we,
Chris is on the way back from Leonard's office.
Wow,
She's
she
on her way
left
back.
us, and she's coming back, wow, she's coming.
So you have to-
Yeah,
Tippy tap.
yeah.
That's a sheet page. Just down straight.
Well, I can get some peanut M&Ms.
I
I
don't
was
know what
planning
to
on not
compare
taking
it
breaks,
to
so I
that.
wouldn't need any peanut M&Ms, but out of control now. I'm scared to. Should I write it down?
Well, I want to see it on the paper. Show me the $2,000 on the paper. It's all words until it's on paper.
You know, the different sort of incentives and tax credits. So we got it.
Well,
There's $40,000 tax credits per bus.
Did you find the schedule?
No, no, for the new year. Ours is, yes, either. They're.
And then they apply for two different credits.
Now, today.
Right.
buses. So all that money.
I did it.
But I go to some exotic places for special.
Western Michigan. I saw, I thought I saw last year's schedule, it's in California. So we feel this point.
I guess you can do it.
And they take care of it.
That's,
You guys,
I know.
when are you guys transitioning?
Significant, like, certifications, I guess there's two things. Yeah, so January will actually start. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, so.
Join Alex at these meetings, as regulars.
Yeah.
I don't come often, I just, those electric buses and also the school performance.
Yeah.
They're gonna show. That's what we'll do. Did they do public comment already at this time?
They did, but there wasn't any, yeah.
By the time the table was opening,
Very good.
So, yeah, this is the election, we're still gonna have some thoughts.
That's someone's concern that he ain't really home in my house anymore. It's kind of warm your heart. That we have to get, that's, that's the right person. The first go around, when I looked at it, we were talking about, the first grant was, about 50%, and I was like, we need to find out what the operator wants, and make sure that we can show people that we're not going to let extra money, instead of each one making even versus.
Yeah, that was all the utilities, upgrades, everything.
Well, I'm curious, because with my Mach-E, my operating cost per mile is 1/4 of an operating cost per gas. You know, it's for fuel.
About $40, that was when we were shop, we were making up $40
Yeah. So it's like, I was curious to see if we get the same benefit, you know, on a per load basis. Per mile basis. I mean.
200 grand towards each bus.
That's what I
And
thought.
then section 74 covered the gap. And then we covered the stall, it's 80 grand.
What's section seven?
That's the state days last.
Ah, okay, that makes
That
total
was
sense
200
now.
grand for each bus. The state, they process all the charger upgrades plus the difference on the bus.
And so, if we can do it, say we can get a 10-year,
process.
duty cycle. A lot of these elections, and they're the same or less than a diesel, and we're able to charge them, and they're the way to go. Not probably, you're gonna need some distance buses for driving sporting events, but for the buses that are on our daily routes, what is our daily route, 60 miles? So it's like, we're not taxing.
When folks went down.
She's just at the start,
They're
so.
talking about linking it into the bus routing software. And then each bus, so that you just drive around, park your bus, plug it in. And then the computer will optimize charging based on the upcoming routes.
What it's gonna need, when it's gonna need it.
Exactly.
And then the rest.
I asked Jonathan.
I think so for now.
Go right on that table up there.
Good start, yeah. Start slow. So you know what M&Ms are. Everybody loves these M&Ms. It's like Carrotina.
They must have
I do somehow in my brain.
I said no.
There's a peanut in
Peanut
there.
in it, yeah.
And just the thin skin of a bit of chocolate. It's a tiny bit.
Coming out next year.
Yeah,
Say,
sure.
for 5 years, I tried to buy.
Find out.
Principal. I was doing
And all your best work is often on the petting room floor.
donuts, quiche, and all the things. They pick at breakfast.
There was gonna be.
And one day, I was running up at dinner time, stopped to breakfast. I said to Rose, can you just put out the snacks, like whatever it is? Like, every single one of them manufactured things like that. I was like, this is what it is,
This is
that's
what I
right.
want for
So now
breakfast.
I don't even try, I just bring them.
And they love you.
And they, all right, Chris, we're
Gone
going
already,
again.
so no peanuts at the first.
How'd it go, Leonard?
Great.
Okay.
All right.
Do you take a breath?
That's a problem.
We did, your timing's perfect, because we were like, oh, we'll just take a little bio break, and then here you go.
Perfect. All right. Ready? Great. So we are going to kind of just talk about how the data, we use our data. So there's obviously various forms of data, and I will kind of focus on the standardized and some formative pieces as well, but really thinking about how those pieces of data influence our district goals, how we kind of understand the context behind our data, and then really looking at how we utilize those to inform and monitor ourselves. So there's so many things to celebrate here. This is the work of many, many hands that our staff, as you well know. With your support, the Board of Education, there's a lot of different ways that we use, a lot of different glances that we look in terms of our data itself. It's not just, we don't just look at STEP or SAP data, we look at really a balanced approach to that, as you well know, and you're part of that, that work. And we, again, our teaching and learning team really representing the work that they do here. Again, our principals and our staff members really have such a great influence over this work as well. And I'm Christine chime in on this one. We look at this as, again, kind of a sum of many parts. There's lots of things that go into our data. We've got statewide data, but really the most important pieces is the students, the glance that we look with our teachers and that influence our students each and every day in the classrooms. And so we wanted to kind of provide that context as there's lots of different pieces that influence this, and we'll talk about those during the presentation, but not one single assessment can meet of any of our students. While we celebrate our data, we have a lot of work to do as well. We have a lot of high achieving students in our district, and we are really challenging ourselves to look deeply at some of the challenges that have persisted for many years with our students, and really being honest about that as well. So we'll celebrate, but we'll also talk about ways that we're digging in as well.
I think it's important to remember that the data that's listed here on this slide is data that was identified by you as a board last year of areas that you were going to continue to track over time. And so we have come back to the table with those same data points so that we can talk about that performance.
And I'll just plug in here, because I do this with my clients all the time, you can drown in data.
Right.
So it's really important to be be able to think about which data can actually help you make decisions, and then just track that data. And you're just gonna have to discard some of the data, because you'll get paralyzed in the analysis.
And I'm thankful this is the formative data. This is the first time, at least I'm seeing, I don't know if you're seeing. So, and we've talked about summative is only as good as it is, because it's after the fact, and I'm glad you made up for more stuff.
Right. It's helpful. Sometimes it's challenging to share the formative at the governance level, just because those are the needs of our teacher, but I appreciate that feedback and sharing it. We're happy to do so. Again, so recognizing some of the limitations and looking at the snapshots of progress. We look at cohorts of, when we're looking at summative data. We look at the ways that we compare ourselves kind of from that 50,000 foot view. Again, when we look at this data, these students are no longer in that grade level, so that's difficult. But we look at it kind of from a 50,000 kind of foot view, sort of a balcony view, and then looking at ways that when we look at the granular level, that's the least impactful on that particular child. So it's important that there's no limitations kind of with that, as we mentioned before. So kind of digging in, jumping right in. We can share this with you in multiple formats. We have grade level. We didn't want to go kind of grade by grade by grade, but we lumped this together for a reason, just to kind of see those trends. We kind of just look again at the 50,000 foot view of this. A couple of the pieces in MSTEP ELA that we're proud of. We're above both state and county average. You can see that starts in 2018-19 and then trends. We skipped the COVID year. Remember that was a blip there where students didn't have to take that test, and so then that trends all the way to where we are currently. And so again, we're proud of the fact that in ELA they're above both state and county average, and looking to make sure that we're continuing to trend in the right direction upwards as we're in 18-19.
Do you guys want us to ask questions as we're going through, or wait till the
You might want to wait till,
There's some natural pauses
So-
in here. Okay, moving. In terms of math, we recall we overhauled our math program, it feels like last year, but it's really been about 2 or 3 years now where we had some early adopters, and then so we're monitoring these trends very closely. Again, proud to see that our students are performing above state and county average. But again, we gain the most information about individual students at the individual student level. So looking at, this is important for us in terms of district improvement. We talked a little bit about this with our work with New Solutions K-12. We are proud of, just to kind of hit some highlights in both ELA and math, that our students are at least partially proficient. About 80% of our students over the years have been at least partially proficient or advanced. So that's exciting. Where we're challenging ourselves to dig in further. As you can see, the students in the red, all of those students, both in ELA and math, have individualized plans that they have for improvement. So each child in ELA, for instance, will have an individual plan for improvement, coupled with other assessments at the school level. Those students in red are important to monitor because those students are not proficient or they're below the standards, and so that's important for us in both of those areas. And so that's kind of the red area that we're, again, we pair that not solely, but we look at that next to formative assessment that we'll talk about.
Can I ask you, is the rest of the county or state seeing that same upward trend in terms of?
But you're saying the
Well,
proficient?
Yeah, but the other one's 3 to 5, this is 3 to 7.
Yeah, no, I'm more at the 3 to 5 when you look at it, it's disconcerting that we're moved up in 2022, and then up again at 23, 24, and then we're with the red. But, so I'm wondering, is
I
that
don't have that
county or
way.
state trend?
I'm not sure, but either which way, we want to make sure that that's going the
Yeah.
other way, right? So that's.
Well, it's just because M-STEP is so
Right.
shaky,
If you
that if
recall-
everybody's moving, then I know
Sure.
it's probably
No
dead
way,
test.
yeah, whether it's.
What's important about this to us, and again, with the New Solutions work that we are challenged by, is those students are almost 80% of that 16%, for instance, in ELA, are special education students. And so those students, we'll talk about that in a later slide. Those students are
Significant, so it's a significant
so we need to think about ways, as we've shared with you, how are we going to close the gap?
So following up on what you said, if you go
Do
three
we want to
slides back.
do this, I mean, we ask, do you want us to do questions now, or do you want us, do you want to keep talking? Because we're.
So how about if we,
Talking
yeah, how about if we
until-
pause after MCAP?
All right.
Just do a couple slides and then we can pause in between.
Yeah, maybe do MSTEP, WSAT,
Yeah.
and pause after each of those, and then get those collectively, make that as good.
So looking at grades 6 and 7, we analyzed some of the same components of the breakdown of how our students are doing. I think one thing for us to celebrate is our continued growth in students who are proficient or advanced in English language arts. And when we look at mathematics, we're also seeing the dwindling or the growth areas at the top, where we have 66% of our students who are advanced or proficient in mathematics this past year. That's a hopeful trend for us, as last year we implemented our new IM math curriculum, so this is the first year of assessment at the end of that, what wasn't quite a full year, but that year where those students in 6th and 7th grade all had the new IM math curriculum last year. So we are going to continue to monitor their scores and look at how our students are performing, but that was a key change. Another change that we saw in middle school last year was our approach to our intervention structures. So we have our math interventionists have received additional training in math recovery, and they have been able to intervene in different ways in our middle schools. And so we're hopeful that those are areas that are contributing to the growth.
Just so when we're looking at the 23-24, that is after a full year of the new math 6 and 7.
It's after 8 months, right? So it's the
Yeah,
spring, right?
yeah.
I don't want to say it was a full year,
Yeah.
because I didn't make it all the way through, but it's in the spring of the first year of 100% implementation at 6 and 7.
So a year from now, we'll be able to see if we're making even more progress.
Correct.
Right.
Yep, we'll be able to see our students.
It's actually,
This is actually.
But last year was the first full year where everybody had that math as opposed to just.
so it's really end of year 3 would be, that would be, so that's next year, next spring, so.
Yeah, this spring will be under year 2, yeah, next spring.
But these are just 6 and 7 grade.
Yeah,
They all
just
had
6 and 7.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, if you really want to look at the, like,
No, I understand what you're saying, yeah.
I'm not telling you, I'm asking myself. because I'm looking at other
You're
stuff.
looking at
It's
full
si-
6, full 7.
You can't look until someone who did 6 and 7 completed 8, right? So, but this is only 6 and 7, so.
Right, but even this year will be different than last year, because last year, about 50% of our 7th graders were in 7, 8 last year,
Right.
and they were grandfathered into that
Right.
structure. So this represents all of 6.
So
and
next
half of
year
7.
should be a very interesting.
So it will be a more reflective of the
Yeah.
change.
Thank you.
If we see some drop next year, then we know we'll be there.
Right. Well, one part of that, and
Assuming
then,
we continue to see that trend.
then the following year is how, if we saw an increase in algebra 1 in 8th grade, then we know everything's set up.
Yeah, that's what we said we would do, we would track that data.
Yeah,
Great, so
but
another
that's so
way.
exciting to see what happens.
Or this is one way that we looked at the data the board had requested us to look at this last year. And so just in following with that, the percentages near the dot is our free and reduced lunch population. Again, those are, when we look at the cause for gaps, or naturally, that's something that is relating to districts that we always want to, those with the lowest free and reduced lunch often have the highest population of students that are proficient. So again, we are proud to report that we have outperforming. If you, the 16% again represents our free and reduced lunch population, and the 65% represents our level of proficiency with all of our grades combined.
Wait, is this 3 to 5, or is this 6 to 7?
This is 3 to
3, 7.
Can you put that up top? Yep, on the slide, just change the slide so it goes to the.
Yeah, we added this one in, so, yes.
Yeah.
It's fine, just so I know what,
Yep.
what we're looking at. Yep.
So where the brown bars are reaching that number?
There's no labels. That's Oakland County, I assume, average.
Oakland County.
It's right in the middle.
And then I assume where the
And
brown.
this, I saw in your note about we've done predicted versus actual performance, but that was my analysis, I guess.
Okay, yeah, I know, you asked for it, that's why I said,
Yeah.
can we continue doing that?
Yeah.
So, thank you.
So you're just kind of different view with the bar on there.
slides are different than what was shared with you in your updated deck, because we found an error in the updated deck, so these are valid.
And you want to update the deck, I just.
We will, okay.
That's okay,
Yeah.
that's totally understandable.
So this is a better view of the science data, where we're above both Oakland and state average, but looking at, we're trending also in, we're improving those scores over time as well, so.
We have 3 separate slides to show you 5, 8, and 11. You'll see trends across all the we've run. So across the years here for 8th grade, it's fairly consistent, but moving from 63 to 64. And then in 11th grade, you'll see both in science and in social studies a fairly significant uptick in MSTEP performance. And a large part of that was focusing on restructuring our testing environment. That's a great conversation Nicole and I had. And our administrators also were feeling very frustrated. Our junior students, our 11th graders, have very little vested in the science and the social studies tests because it's not the SAT, and it doesn't matter particularly to them. And so getting our students to perform at a level that is representative of their knowledge is challenging. And so we've worked on what the structure of the day might look like, how do you embed the test, where does it fit as not get testing fatigue. So what you'll see in this slide, but also what you'll see in social studies, next slide, is that significant gap was just closed by where we situated the assessment during the day and not having students dismissed during the winter. So in testing, in the 33% test, students were allowed to leave as soon as they were complete. So they were finishing. They were like, see. So our hope is that this is a more representative assessment, and we'll continue to tweak what that looks like for our students. But I also think that it demonstrates a fairly thicker representation of our students' knowledge when it comes to science and social studies, and that's just something that we have to own as we look into those concepts as well. So this is digging into, let's talk about, sure, let's talk about it. Yep.
Because I didn't ask any questions.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
If we go back to the second or third slide where we had step 370 already. Yeah, this is the one. So one thing I've noticed when I saw this slide is over the last 3 years, I know it's not the same cohort, I get it, our percentage of students who are proficient is slightly going down. The first 2 years I see, but with the state and the county going down is far less compared to how we are getting. Our slope is a lot more than almost like the state doesn't even go down. You can say it's about the same. And the county is a little bit down, but not even down like 2 to 3 percentage points. I know we can round in data, and I know I'm nitpicking, but any thoughts of
That's a trend.
any thoughts of what could we be doing? I know we are still way above them, and that's a point to celebrate, but still we can look into why we are dipping more than the rest of the state or the country.
You're looking for an answer?
Just
Okay.
wondering.
I think that that is something that obviously we share in looking at our formative assessments, we're challenged with our students right now. The group that is the cause for gap is our students that are in special education and therefore not exposed to our curriculum. And that's something that Nate Levinson and the outside group have shared with us very explicitly. So for instance, making sure that those students have 100% of their time here for instruction, making sure they have, secondly, making sure they have access to a content area teacher, and third, making sure that that's additional time, not time taken away. And so those things are extremely important to that gap, so students aren't being exposed properly to the grade level standards that they're supposed to be exposed to. So when they're taken out, oftentimes, if we're, again, being honest, and it's hard to share, there's things that they're doing that are not progressing them to these standards, and that's represented on our formative and summative assessments.
So have
Is
you
there-
been able to make some of those changes even this school year, or is that something you're still working on for next year?
Absolutely, yeah, we're working on that this school year in particular.
So
yeah.
you've already made some improvements in getting those kids into core
Yes.
instruction more?
Mhm.
Okay, all right, so we're,
Yep, Yep.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, it has, over the last, the 3 years that we're looking at, has the number of special education students gone up?
I'd have to look at it to make sure. I'm not sure. But what we're noticing is in those students that are not proficient on,
Or is it that a higher percentage of our special education students are not performing?
I have to
Are, yeah.
look at, but those students are about they make up of that 16% in this red area. About 70 to 80% of those are special ed students.
Do we work?
We are seeing an increase in the severity of the kids that have special ed.
I know we're seeing that, yes.
And I was trying, because I did see a chart earlier, not in this presentation, but where we are,
So with good
For
intentions,
specific
we're taking
issues,
kids out to
there is a
give them
basic-
interventions that are helping them to progress. towards
Like, I
their
mean, I
goals.
guess the question is it more students who are special education who are not reaching at least a partially proficient level? Or do we also have, is it one, the other, or both at the same
both.
time?
I think it's both.
So with more students and maybe a higher percentage that is not.
Well, our enrollment in special education is about 10%.
9 to 10.
It's pretty consistent.
That's all areas.
Right, we don't seem to.
No, but when you break that out by categorization for the IEP, the more complex issues are increasing. So you might have the same
Yeah,
number
it
of kids in
certainly feels
special
like it,
ed.
right.
No, yeah, I mean, we have a graph that shows that over 5 years, because that's,
Yeah.
I remember looking at it now, and it's like when you look at it, you have your ASD is way up.
That's what I was gonna say.
So you may have the same number of kids, but the severity of the disabilities is increasing. So it is some of,
So is it possible, do you guys have the data where you can pull out and say of this, grade 3 to 5, of this 16.77 that's not proficient, what percentage of those students are special education students? Because I think even having that would be,
That's where I'm saying the 70 to 80% are special ed.
but they
But
might
we
not
can-
all be not proficient, so I'm saying of the not proficient,
No,
how
I'm saying
many?
that they're 70 to 80% of the 16 are special ed. I'm saying that's the cause for the gap. That's the cause for that group. If 80% of that group, 70 to 80% of that group makes it as special ed.
so that means you've got 20 to 30% who are not special, but are still not proficient. So then the question is, what's going on with that 30%?
And that's where we get to the formative side.
Yeah.
Those students that are in that pinkish red area those are the students with the hybrid plans, those are the students with the specialized plans that we're digging into and able to drill down to and see exactly where those deficiencies are and how are we making sure that those are the students that are in front of the highest qualified instructors during non-core instructional time.
Yeah.
That's the work with Nate Levinson that we've been really digging into. Chris and her team at the elementary have been digging into, and Christine at the secondary, how we build out that same opportunity at the secondary level.
To be, about 10% of our students are special needs or special education needs. Is the state average and the county average about similar?
A little bit higher.
So the county and state is
It's
higher or
a little
we
bit
are
higher.
higher?
No,
We are not.
the state, we are lower than the state and the
Oh,
county.
okay.
It unfortunately, that tracks pretty closely to Fraser's as well.
Okay, all right. So which means in theory we should perform slightly better than the state and national.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. We go to the next slide, I think my questions, no, one more. Oh, that one. I guess the fourth one is Troy. I wanted to know what the sixth one is. Because we're doing wonderful with 26% free and reduced, because that was just
That's
kind of
tough,
true.
right?
It was, it's,
Oftentimes it's
yeah, it
Is there a reason why we left all the district names off?
So,
Sure.
they just created this chart this morning, so
Oh, okay.
it's not fair.
And I think just as a county, we've often, out of respect for the challenges that we all face, not flaunted our how good we are compared to others in our own county. And so, that's a lengthy conversation we had as a cabinet team, talking about how we, show respect for each other as well, so.
Also not naming on purpose, you do it. Okay. Okay. 26%.
That's one of the few ways you can use this.
Yes, exactly. The next one is the social studies and science slide that I had a question.
So the science one is now 3 slides, so.
Oh, okay.
5, 8, 11, and then the social studies is this.
Yeah, the question I have is the state average and the county average, is that the current year? This
Yes.
year's?
Yes.
The ours is the 3 years, but
Correct.
the state average and the county average is, I don't know.
So I do have a question on this one. So it seems convenient to say our kids are not motivated to take the test in high school. Because wouldn't you have the same issue with any other school district if you have somebody in high school taking the social studies test? And the fact that that's the only area where we're below Oakland County, it makes me question whether our social studies curriculum is actually
So we're not
up to
below the
snuff
county.
versus our other.
They're
This year.
below last year, because don't look at the same year.
Yeah.
The last 3 are the same year. So we don't have
Oh,
last
I'm
year.
sorry, okay, I just looked
Yeah.
at Metropolitan County and looked at us in orange, but.
Yeah.
So we
but
are
so
already
we're-
this year.
Oh, so we actually,
We're gray across.
okay, so we moved up just by changing the environment.
Yes.
Wow, that certainly says something about the middle school.
And then it's also quite possible that our kids are taking more than their average share of APs, AP tests, and all sorts of other testing, and they just, whereas,
Interest in it.
and lose interest in test taking as opposed to.
I don't think
I just don't want to dismiss that as, I mean, to me, that's a way of saying, oh, no, it's not us.
Do we
It's the
know,
kids.
well, but this
It's
is,
like,
the other piece of this is,
is
do
it
we
us?
know what,
Yeah.
do we know what
So
social
that's an
studies?
amazing shift in 1 year.
Because the other thing that I think is important to talk about too is that like this a lot of kids don't necessarily take their like government until their senior year. So like if depending on what's being, they might not have taken the
Right.
class yet.
Well,
So,
that's,
like, they-
I know, and that's what I
yes.
wonder, is that they're going to test over material that we don't put in front of them before that.
And so that's, I mean, because we have the kids who do the
So-
like AP social studies, but then we have kids that are.
Right. But I want to go back to the dip again, though. So did we change something in 22-23 that we think caused that dip? In
At the
terms
high
of the-
school?
Yeah, in terms
Yeah.
of how we administered the test.
If they complete as soon as they're done.
That's the first year and only year we allowed them to do.
That was also, that's the COVID cohort.
Right.
That 33, that orange year, those are the kids that did a year and a half of high school
Right.
in virtual. So.
But I'm with you.
But I
If that's
think
the only
leaving as
year
soon
that
as
the
you
kids
can.
were
But I mean,
done,
it's like Brenda
that's a
saying,
positive. I'm there. It's
They
like totally there.
their curriculum was, they got.
Yeah.
the
No, no, no,
social-
there's a number
I mean,
of things
it's a
going on there,
multiple
right.
factors, but the biggest one was that they could.
They could leave.
22, 23 was, 9th grade was COVID for them, okay?
Yeah.
10th and 11th were normal.
Okay.
10th wasn't really.
Oh, 10th was
All right,
not
I'm
normal.
okay with this. I don't know. No, I wouldn't read, yeah, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Ready to move on to PSAT? Okay, great. So our PSAT data looks a lot like our MSTEP data, right? We're looking at the actual graphs themselves. I think, we can look at our consistency of performance over time, but very much like what Chris was just sharing, when we think about how we're going to improve and move on as an organization, we need to look at what this graph isn't telling us. So when we dig into what informs how we can improve, we really look at our students with disabilities. What's not present here, and I think is important for you to know, is 57% of our students who have disabilities were either not proficient or partially proficient, compared to only 13% of our students without disabilities. So there's a significant overrepresentation of our students who are not proficient in these areas. And one of the other areas that we've been talking a little bit about and we are learning more about is the state offers a student growth measurement as well, looking at standardized assessments. And our students with disabilities are also overrepresented in below average growth from year to year. So it indicates to us that it's not just about whether they're meeting that proficiency of the grade level, but they're also not growing at the same rate or a higher rate than their peers. And so our practices to support our students with disabilities needs to change, our structures need to change, and that's something that we've been working on and we're going to continue to talk a little bit more about throughout this presentation.
Ms. Vicky, numbers that we're looking at, those are the students that are, would be considered proficient or highly
We've
proficient.
got proficient or advanced, all students, so this is based on all students, all eighth graders in Troy. And then this is in ELA, and then the next slide represents mathematics, all students. And I think, just to kind of share that same sentiment around our work, our students with disabilities in eighth grade, 87% of our students with disabilities in eighth grade are not proficient or only partially proficient, compared to 32% of students without disabilities. So this is an important piece, because that's not the story when you look at this chart, but that is what we understand we need to address as an organization in order to improve our experiences for students.
Do we know that same statistic for open school?
Yes, not on top of my head.
But I mean, that is data that we have access to.
Yes.
Because that's, what I would want to know whether we are,
I don't think so.
whether that's a higher proportion for us than it is for open school. Because if it isn't, then that's not what's possible.
And again, this is gonna be ELA.
Right, this is.
This has
This is
both.
both.
Oh,
So
okay.
the top line is ELA,
Okay.
and the bottom line is mathematics.
Okay.
And then this is us compared to the county, based on free and reduced lunch, which is at, or economically disadvantaged, it's at 14% for the Troy School District. And you can see how we are, where we sit in performance with our peers who have similar socioeconomic disadvantage percentage in their organization. Okay, I'm gonna go to SAT unless there's PSAT questions.
I do have.
Oh, yeah.
So can we go to, the math? So I found this really interesting because this, we have, what looks like almost consistently gone down, or have not rebounded in any case. And these are students who are under our old math structure.
Correct.
So these are the students who had access, because these were eighth graders,
Yeah,
right?
so, yeah, but some of our eighth graders who were not in honors math were in the new IM math this year.
That's the pilot one.
No, all of the eighth graders who weren't in honors math were
Were
just
in
eighth
eighth
grade
grade
math last year, were in the IM eighth grade math.
As opposed to the Bridges.
Right, but they had 6 and 7 bridges and then eight IM.
But that was
Big ideas.
not big ideas, yeah.
I know it's a B.
I'm like, it's not something with the B. But even looking at, the prior year, 22-23, all of those students would have all been big ideas students.
Yep.
Would have been the old curriculum, with the old everything.
Yep.
So I guess I find it interesting that even with the eighth graders, the vast majority of them were still going through the old curriculum, through the old structure, that we've gone down that much since 18-19. Do we have any idea?
Well, we have the COVID gap, right? So our new foundational, I think, proficiency is at 67.5%, right? Like as we're comparing
But
apples.
then we went up like a teeny tiny bit, and then we went back.
Yeah.
We
down.
did go
So
down,
it's
but so
22,
did the
23.
state and so did the county. So we're just looking at, and I'm not justifying.
No,
Yeah, no, but I
think like
see
when we
what
look
you're
at the data points of
Right.
how we're trending with state and county.
And others didn't necessarily even have a new curriculum for those eighth graders who were taking just eighth grade math as opposed to algebra one.
So,
So, okay.
So this will be, but just like when we talked about with 6 and 7 in the M-STEP, this eighth grade data point will be an important data point, right? Because we're watching all of these data points as our students go through their math experience in our middle schools.
so, I was gonna say, so this one, it's like, when I look at it, you see that county and state went down as well, like we all kind of went down. But if you go back one slide.
They didn't
to
all
ELA,
make they didn't all make
That's what,
it.
Yeah, if you go back to ELA, my concern is that the state and the county did not go down, but
They
we
went
did.
up. They
So
went up, I think.
we have, the state and county are closing the gap with us because we're not moving up the way they're moving up in ELA. So that is disconcerting.
But that's where when you're talking about going from 84% proficient to higher than 84% proficient, that's where the focus on our students with disabilities comes into play.
But we went,
for our work. Like, I'm agreeing with you,
I
like,
know.
we should be concerned, but I think in order for us to gain traction, we really need to.
But we weren't delivering special ed differently in 23-24 than we were in 22-23.
Right.
And yet we went down. And that's the part, it's like, so you gotta show me, there's, do you know what I mean? If
Yeah.
we're constant, if our delivery is constant, the results should be constant. So there's something funky going on here because everybody else, I don't get too worked up when everybody moves at the same.
Sure.
If the tide goes
Yep.
up and down and we maintain our lead, but this is an example where we're reducing our lead.
Sure. And again, it's a different cohort of students who perform on an assessment at any given time. So, like, we have to give ourselves that sort of.
But it's a one that we need to keep.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Keep an eye on it.
that's,
Right.
Yep.
we're talking about census information, and the county and the state have not changed. Those are
Sure.
stable numbers. So if those have gone up and we're going down, there's something going on. It's not just
So-
annual
That's one I highlight.
wiggle.
And we were making a rebound post-COVID and then
Right.
it stalled.
It
Those were
could,
my
it could also be that we did the rebound post-COVID faster than the others, rest of the state, but it's just a bit too soon. Because we did jump quite a bit from 81 to 85.6 first year, and then it kind of
Yeah,
stopped.
I mean, I
But
do
Oakland
understand.
schools in the
Yeah.
state, but Oakland school, if you look at that chart, Oakland schools in the state average is higher now than they were pre-COVID. Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, so they've actually.
They've
and I don't wanna-
they've not only rebounded, they've potentially made,
Right.
they've made gains.
Right, and I, certainly don't want to downplay the fact that
Yeah.
we're looking at 84% proficiency at the end.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not to beat you up at
Yeah.
all, but to me, it's, and we're talking small percentages, but it does concern me when everyone else is going up and we're going down.
This would be one I highlight, see where it lands next year as we continue to work.
I do have one question, and it's a general question asking you guys. If you go to the third slide where it has both ELA and math. Yeah, this one, this one.
I was like.
It seems to be always the case that we tend to, our ELA outperforms our math all the time. And it seems to be the state average as well, and the county average as well. Are the tests so different that it's kind of easier to perform better in ELA than math? Just curious, your professional opinion. Or is it harder to be proficient with the math?
I've never seen that.
That's what I wonder.
I think
That's
that
it.
is an evidence of the fact that we know the research that we use to make the decisions that we made in that
Trying to see if we can reduce that gap between the
pre-algebra foundation in 6th and 7th grade is so important. And if you don't have it, it shows up in 8th grade, which is why we see persistently lower scores statewide, nationwide in math, especially when you hit 8th grade. That's why the 8th grade year is so pivotal. Again, that's why that 6th and 7th grade year is so, with a solid pre-algebra foundation is so important. That's a really tough nut to crack down.
It's just more an observation. It's been that way all along.
Yeah, right.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. I wonder if the test was so off.
Ready to shift to SAT?
Sure.
So there's quite a few SAT charts throughout here. So this chart represents our overall SAT scores for the full district. So performance for THS, which is the Troy High School, Athens High School, and TCCHS all put together. On the top line, we're going to look at student overall performance level. So this is for students this is the percentage of students.
Thank you. I'm like, what is that
Sorry.
number?
This is the percentage of students who scored advanced or proficient in both writing,
In the total
evidence-based
score.
reading and writing, and math.
Can we add that?
Yes.
That description on the slide?
Is this include IA as well, or?
IA is aggregated into the, their
Their consortium with the others.
correct.
Is it not possible to get that data at all?
We've gotten it once before, and, actually twice, the 2 times we've seen it, they're 100% proficient. So it's not a lot of, and it's not formal, it's great information to celebrate, but it's not.
But it's not a normal
distribution.
Because, well, and we don't have any control over their curriculum to choose, so.
A limited scope.
No, but it also gives, always gives the impression that we're not divided, but I think putting it here just is one way of saying, we are looking at them as well, and we do care about them.
So we included them in talking about diploma acquisition, which I think is a really key piece of the work that they do and an indicator of their success, and I think that really helps us to highlight what it is in the work that they're doing.
Putting them here would be an apples to oranges comparison.
Well, it's because we have no control over their curriculum.
And it's a self-selecting process. So it's not a normal distribution.
So this slide looks at our two high schools. So this is Troy High School and Athens High School on our either meets or exceeds for, this has to be ELA. I'm looking at it and it's not marked. As I'm looking at this for you guys, it is not marked. This is an ELA score because we already have, oh no, this is total. I'm sorry. So this again, the total indicates both reading and mathematics for just like this last slide. So this is students who scored both, either meet or exceeds in evidence-based reading and writing and mathematics. We'll have to clarify that again on the SAT. And now-
It does say total.
Yeah, it does say on
It says total.
Right, it does say total.
Doesn't indicate.
It doesn't
actually
indicate.
that. So I'm gonna clarify that for my own sake.
I was just giving you reassurance that you are
Thank
saying the right thing.
Thank you. This is, I think, when we look at this is our trend data of our overall performance. Again, total, both evidence-based reading, writing, and mathematics. It's from 2015 through 2024 of our two high schools. And we had lots of conversation around this graphic and our
Ginormous gap.
and our gap that we certainly see. When we look at, just a reminder that the 2021 school year isn't really valid data. That was an optional testing year, so that's not a really accurate representation of anything in our district. So if you look from 2018 to 21-22, that's where we see kind of the resetting of the line for the last 4 years of session. Yep.
Could you set this for the 0 to 80, because it does exaggerate the differences, like just going 30 to 80%.
Yep.
It's kind of a no-no for accurate graphing. It just it exaggerates the differences.
Chris is gonna fix it.
Yeah.
Chris is gonna handle it. And then when we dig in to look at those last 3 years, we're looking at, this is our evidence-based reading and writing for our two high schools, Troy High School and Athens High School.
So it's interesting that.
The math is steady.
Yeah, I just,
Can you go back, just go back, I just want to look at that again, so.
5 points to 10 points.
It's just
Change.
right, nothing's changed, it's like we're doing the same thing, right? It's nothing now.
And I think that's really, a huge piece of the study and the work that we're trying to figure out when we're looking at our students. Again, the conversation that we had about how do we continue to improve, it is to dig into our students who are not proficient and
Yeah.
ensure that they are receiving structures that are supportive. We know that in our middle schools and in our high schools, many of our students with disabilities are tracked into classes where they are not receiving grade level instruction. And so that's key work that we've taken on as we've gone into this year. One of the key changes that we've made is in our special education support classes, our students are cohorted by IEP goals, areas of focus, rather than cohorted by grade level, which allows our teachers to provide more focused intervention for students in their resource group support rather than homework help or task completion. So we're really working on how do we start to alleviate some of those challenges.
This is another example though where your scale is exaggerating the difference, because I've thought, oh, there's a big drop, and then I'm like, oh, it's only 76 to 72.7, so I would adjust your scales,
But
because
still.
it's a much flatter line than that would suggest.
It is still a 5% change, from 5% gap to 10% gap. I do want to ask though, so we did a lot of MTSS for math, and we have this double math class to improve that. And I guess it's showing in your next slide that it's flat, right? It didn't get widened. are we doing similar things for our ELA, in our high school? Is that what?
So our ELA structure for support does look different than math at our high school. What we've spent some time talking about, and actually most recently, is our ELA supports in the district over the last 10 years really evolved from coaches. So we had coaches, ELA literacy coaches that were put in place at the middle level when there was an implementation of our new ELA curriculum. So that was back in 16, 17, 18. And those grew with the implementation of the curriculum into the high school. So over the last few years. When we juxtapose that to the creation of our math interventionists, when we hired and started training our math interventionists, the sole focus for them initially out of the gate was intervention with some coaching for teachers around the intervention. And our literacy specialists have evolved to also help support in intervention, but that wasn't a focus area of how they came on board. And so even this year, as we've been digging into this work, we've been talking about how do we need to consider growing, restructuring what those supports look like for adults when we look at intervention. So the short answer is no, they don't look the same. The longer answer is we understand why they don't look the same, and that's an area where we think we could make some improvements.
The other thing I think that will be really interesting to track with this is the next year's juniors will be the first year that kids could opt into AP 11 voluntarily.
Right.
And so I would be curious too, what the percentage of the number of kids who are taking AP 11 in those different grades, because the English elective your junior year is very, like it's like that's the year you get to take film, or like it's not a structured writing class, so they get structured writing in 9th and 10th. 11th grade they get to take free-for-all ELA electives, and then 12th is structured again. And is that playing, so the kids who don't take AP 11, is that playing into that,
I imagine.
that discrepancy?
And if you have more, if a high percentage of kids that try 19 and AP 11,
Right, and
then
then, so
that's going
like,
to explain a lot of the gap.
and so if we have, because you guys had said that we had 24% more kids in AP 11 this year, because when they could opt in.
Right.
So if that's the case, then I would anticipate that that
That year
number will go
should-
up, even if they don't do well on the AP test, I imagine they will do better on the SAT.
Well, and if you look at, like 4 slides ahead, we're gonna talk about we're gonna talk a little bit more about the SAT, abilities reading and writing.
Well,
So,
and the other thing is that if you go back to the regression we did last year on this, I would imagine if we know we would perform well above what we should based on our socioeconomic level as a district. And I imagine that if you look at each of the, if we broke our schools out and look at socioeconomic differences, we'll probably explain virtually that entire gap.
we also
But
have,
probably both schools will probably be higher than they would be expected.
Yes.
and we have,
You know what I mean?
between our
I know.
schools,
Yeah.
we have, again, if you look at the student growth measurements, we have certain groups of students who achieve at a higher level at advanced student growth, so exceeding student growth. So there's like average student growth, below average, and above average student growth. There's an overrepresentation of above average student growth at Troy High School than there is at Athens High School, based on student groups. So if you look at and break down our students based on whether it be students' disability, whether it be demographics, there's different groups, and there's an overrepresentation of
And
overachievers.
do we know why that, do we have a clue as to why that is?
I mean, I think we can start to dig in and start to look at, but it's a
That would suggest
representation
there's-
all the way through their schooling. It's not a representation of a school.
Right, so but you're saying that group they advance at a faster rate.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And it's like that can't be a geographic difference between our children, so is there something going
I mean,
on?
it can be based on if we're buying houses in the district and they're looking at what is the elementary, middle, and high school.
Or are people buying outside educational services that are supplementing what we're providing? You might have. Right.
Because I know quite a few people who live in my subdivision around that area who
Yeah.
bought into the district.
Right.
It was, I want this elementary, middle, and high school, and this is the only
But-
where I will buy.
Yeah, but that's data you can find that out.
Can I ask one
Yeah.
question? For the SAT test, are
Yeah.
these scores from what the school administers? Or is it also what the students have taken in 12th, 11th
No,
grade
this is what
outside?
the schools administer on the test in the spring.
So one thing
They don't take their best score, though I wish they would.
I know. One thing I'm wondering is, to counter this, the kids who have gotten private coaching and has taken their SAT, they usually probably do it in 11th grade or sometimes even.
Well, this is
10th grade. This is for
This is
SAT,
11th.
yeah. But they do it outside, not
Yep.
necessarily in the school, but school
So they can
administers.
practice.
Yeah, and they may not even put their best effort in this one, because they
Sure.
already
Right.
did one and they already got what they want.
That's a possibility.
Yeah, so so this proficiency is probably a good one because they already have done it.
Right, have practice.
Yeah, practiced.
So this is the crazy slide.
Tell you whether the score you're seeing is that kid's first attempt, second, third attempt.
I don't know that the state tells us that because they only look at that one.
Yeah, but SAT couldn't share that. The SAT doesn't share the data with us. I don't know if they share that.
So-
That would be a fascinating house.
The scores get sent to the school automatically, whether we aggregate them or not, it's up to us, I think. Because when they take it outside, the score does get sent to the school automatically.
So somewhere we would know individually.
Yeah, we do know, but I don't know what we do with it, or do we even receive it in the sense, do we even aggregate it at all? I don't know that we get it. It's automatically sent to the school that your student belongs to. Whether we
I
get
don't
it or
know.
not,
I don't know.
know.
It's on their college board account, but I don't know if the school has access.
A lot of SAT send it to the high school.
What's that?
It's the school that we belong to, that's why it automatically goes.
Okay, I wanted you to see this graph because I think it's further evidence of the conversation we're having about the social studies and the M-STEP, and you can see how erratic that graph is for how our students perform. You can also see that by specifically the big change was at Athens around when students were dismissed from testing, and you can see how the change went from 27% proficient to 47% proficient in the school year. So Carl and I talk about like outliers and
Yeah,
like that's.
yeah, no, it's.
I just wanted you to see how.
It is an outlier.
That's
good.
So they matched Troy High.
Right. I think it was 43 and 47, so, yeah, the way that charted it. It was just an illustration. So this is our combined SAT evidence-based reading and writing scores for the district. The district in blue, Oakland schools in orange, and then the state in gray. I think what's important to note, and this kind of digs into a little bit of the conversation that we were having, we have studied as an organization over the last 6 years in particular, how the patterns of our students' performance across years in English to better understand where our students are performing their best and how we are preparing them for college. And so, as Nicole was talking a little bit about the experience of students through high school, we identified back in 2019 that our students' experience in high school at that time were a selection of different options in ninth grade that had varying sets of expectations, a selection of options in 10th grade that had varying sets of expectations. And then in junior year is where all of the electives were running, and currently are running in the high school. And so we have students who were not taking, some of them weren't taking first semester of English at all, and then rolling into our SAT. And then we had some students who were taking AP 11 in junior year, and then in senior year we go back to 12th grade. So for the last 6 years, the ELA teachers have spent time really talking about this, and as you know, we made significant changes at 9 and significant changes in 10, with a goal to have a very solid foundation for choice in 11. And right now, this year, they're studying what does 11 look like and what does 12. And so the goal is to provide a 2-semester, if not AP 11, a 2-semester choice for students with a strong foundational English experience that has choice and student voice in it. So I share all that because when you look at our advanced and proficient numbers, they're the highest in 8th grade. So we're at 84%, upwards of 88% in the last 6 years. And they go down from 8th grade to 11th grade. And further, when you really dig into the data, previously all of our student groups were highly achieving. And what we were seeing in high school was that not only was our average going down, but our students with disabilities were going way down. And our, some of our specific student groups were going way down. And so our hypothesis was that was because there were students who didn't find joy in English, and so they were choosing not to, in their junior and senior year, pursue or push themselves. Also, they were given opportunities to opt out in 9th and 10th grade. And so this work that we're taking on right now is an opportunity for us to study providing all of our students with access to high expectations in classrooms and then meeting them where they are to ensure they're successful.
So what do students take the PSAT in 8th grade?
Yes.
Do they take it again in 9th grade? What about 10th grade?
Yes.
So what are we seeing when it comes to ELA between 9, 10, and then the SAT in 11? So that's one question. And then my second question would be, since the SAT, we give it junior year, I assume that's when most students take it for college. And they're writing essays in the summer or in the fall of senior year. Why are we giving, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be this way, but why are we giving students choice in 11th grade as opposed to saying, this is what you need, one, to take the SAT, two, to write your college essays and do all these things, and then
And
give
then
them
play
choice
as a
at
senior.
12.
Yep.
And give them choice at 12, but why is that foundational work not being done 9, 10, and 11, and then giving them, or is that part
That
of
is
the
what we're
discussion?
happening. So by choice, I think it's important to know that choice and elective are not,
The
they're
same
not
thing.
synonymous.
Okay.
So right now.
To
there's-
me, they are, so
Right,
that's-
so in an elective base, for our elective based classes, it can be anything from newspaper, right, to creative writing, to, a literary study.
Okay.
And so what we're looking at is in the junior year, how do we create, the teachers are currently developing and asking the question, how do we create high-level choice requirements for students? Like, you can take one of these 4 first semester and one of these 4 second semester, and any one of these 4 will meet the needs to prepare you for SAT and writing for your college.
At MSU, as at MSU, had American Thought and Language, it was freshman English, but the subject was completely different.
Right.
But the caliber of writing requirement was the same, so you could do women's studies.
Right.
It
you
could be
do-
essay writing, I don't care, like whatever it is.
But the point is that
okay.
if the choice is how am I learning the same standards?
And
It's
it's
a
a high
subject to
interest.
choice.
Right.
Yeah,
Interest.
interest.
Okay.
And the other thing is, if you look at the data here and you look at pre-COVID versus now, everybody's down about 4 to 5 points, and our relative position compared to everybody else is the same. So this is again one where I look and go, well, none of us have completely recovered from COVID, and I think all the teachers saying are completely valid. And how do I move from 77, up? What you're talking about makes perfect sense to me.
And I think
But
just,
I don't get worked up over this one because I feel like we're holding our lead.
and so just to give that same data point, so we talked about PSAT 8, 57% of our students with disabilities on the PSAT 8 were not proficient or advanced. When we're looking at the SAT in 11, 78% of our students with
So we're
disabilities
crashing.
are not
By the
proficient.
time we get to the end of high school, we're
So we're seeing that, and like those patterns are ones that are moving the structure, they're moving our system, and that's what we're going to continue to study.
And I think,
So you're saying if we put more effort on our special needs students in excelling, this number would automatically go down?
Right.
Because the biggest number that is not
You're
excelling
you're
is
raising
that.
rigor, right?
Yeah, okay.
You're raising rigor for those kids.
Are we like rethinking how to do the special needs education design, or are we just improving?
Right, so that's part of the structure of change for our resource room students, how we're using our intervention time, how we are scheduling our students into tier 1 courses. So the differentiation and the universal design elements of 9th and 10th grade are to ensure that we can have students who may have in the past been excluded to be part of our tier 1. And then in addition to tier 1 instruction, they're getting intervention.
That's the big levels.
Right,
That's all,
so
I mean, that's all.
instead of being pulled out to get intervention and not going, so in the past, you said, oh, 9th grade English might not be a good fit for you, we're gonna give you this course. Now we're saying that you're going to spend time in 9th grade English, and then in a different block, we're gonna help to make sure you understand what's going on. So here's SAT math, and again, same conversations as we work through our math structures, we're going to continue to watch our numbers. Our students with disabilities struggle incredibly in high school in mathematics. And our high school math tracks have been a very big challenge for our students because we've had many students who have been in separate math courses. So when we look at our students with disabilities, 89% of students with disabilities in 11th grade are not meeting the standards of math.
So this graph says it's way beyond special needs.
Correct, yeah.
It's only 60% of our kids that are really proficient.
Yep.
So everybody.
Everybody's going down. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, county's going down, the state's going down, yeah, but we're going down.
This is where you will see
these
students
are-
opting out of math by 11th grade. I mean, they're academy to 11th grade, and the students are making a choice not to be engaged in higher levels of mathematics too.
But
And
this
this
is SAT math, it is not like, calculus or
Yeah,
algebra.
but-
This is a basic algebra.
I think
exam.
we're seeing code effects now there because the foundational work, when these kids were building their math foundations.
So these are algebra 1 COVID kids?
Yeah. And if you think about that, of all topics to try to learn remotely, algebra 1 has got to be
They had
one
their
of the
entire high
hardest
school.
shifts. And again, and also is that foundational work in middle school, right? And it's like if they were lacking that foundational in middle school, then we built a house on sand. So they probably struggled with the rest of high school. We
But
never
if-
were able to close the gap.
That theory is that we should just bounce back up next year.
Well, bounce
But yeah,
back.
but these are,
yeah.
these are all,
Yes, you should.
but these are all kids who have seen no curriculum change. Correct.
Yeah.
Well, we know the curriculum we were providing home was not the same caliber.
No, but I'm saying
Yeah.
this is.
As far as our improvements.
Yeah.
Correct.
No, it is not a curriculum change, so it's.
But again, this is
It's
one where,
something else.
if you look at the stair stepping, the county and the state,
Yeah.
it's like, I think that's I think more than anything we're seeing in the last year is COVID, because everybody's moving.
And one other piece, just to note, and this isn't gonna explain much of anything, but just to keep in mind, this is the first SAT that our students have taken as all digital.
Oh.
Right, so this is the first digital application now. That would impact everybody.
Yes.
So,
Right,
I think
another
just to
year.
make
But all
it-
of the numbers went down.
Yeah.
So the idea
So that's a
that.
title issue.
Here's our county. Oh, they have the names on there. So, feast your eyes. There's our performance.
I see Oxford. No, that wasn't it.
Which one
I
is
think
it?
they get the one that is, no?
These are different.
Is it
Oxford.
different? No, that's not, that's.
So that's where we are.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So this kind of moves us into our reflections and uses of summative data. So Chris, I don't know if you want to hit on
Sure.
this.
So I think more importantly than anything as we started, summative data is really used at district level or school level, not necessarily for individual. We'll talk about how that's used at the individual level in the next piece, but looking at ways that we use this information. So we have a district-wide multi-tiered system of support process where we talk about strategies and we're digging into that and challenging ourselves now more than ever. The gaps that we're very honest with you about are gaps that plague schools all over the United States, and it's something that is really difficult. And so I appreciate the partnership, kind of just system-wide, from again our principals and our educators. It's difficult to kind of move this steer the ship in those categories, in particular with those students with learning disabilities. It's a difficult task to kind of collaborate and to work through. So teams just recently about what you can do with this time. So each building has an MTSS team that meets on a regular basis. Like usually that time is bi-weekly in most buildings. And so things they do in that time is bring students with IEPs to discuss maybe either scheduling or reviewing progress monitoring plan of any student. Or sometimes they're working on team dynamics or sharing celebrations or trying to review some of those data points. And so those are things that, again, the idea of bringing all educators to a table that involve that child and making sure that everyone has that idea to monitor the students' progress of their plans and they're not getting into the specifics on that.
Can I ask you a question before
Yep.
we go on that? Just from and maybe it's an answer from over here. When we think about MTSS deployment, do you feel that, we'll start with elementary, do you feel like we have, obviously we're always going to improve, we're always going to work on it, but do you feel that we have, from a training perspective, that we have an adequately trained baseline for all of our instruction for K-5? Do you think we're 50% or 75% there? You know,
Are you talking about the training?
For the teachers, for the teachers, like if I were to just randomly step into an elementary classroom and then watch the teacher as he or she teaches, would I see strong evidence in any classroom that MTSS is, that the teacher feels comfortable and confident that you know, they have adequate training to provide necessary supports?
Absolutely. I mean, I would
So
say,
you're at an
obviously,
elementary-
we have a lot of work to do, and I'm not saying,
Yeah, but
check, we've got it, by
Right,
any
right.
stretch, but I think we've done a massive overhaul. When we first started this work, we didn't have data in Illuminate, for instance.
Right.
We didn't have coaching, you know, that kind of, I mean, we had it in parts, but we didn't have it systematized, and so I think that's important, you know.
So right now in elementary level, I know this is where we started it, but you're feeling like we've got, everybody's had their training, everybody, I'm gonna see a pretty consistent application
I think
process.
so.
Okay, let me turn to you, because I know you haven't had much time on
Yeah.
this. So where do you think we're at secondary level? And maybe even if you wanna split it between middle and high school, if those are coming online at a different rate.
And I appreciate the think tank. I think that when you think about our students or our teachers, specifically in response to our students, we have a variety of responses and we're in a variety of places. So when we think about MTSS, the structure for MTSS, I think has existed at the administrative level in our buildings at secondary for a while and is owned by our administrators, school social workers, counselors, and then some of our key interventionists. The work that we've really taken on over the last year and a half is how do we move it from the main office
To
to
the
our
classrooms,
teachers,
right? And do the teachers own it?
Right, and so some of our principals have said those exact words. The work that we're doing, specifically related to our PLCs and the time that we have built into the secondary day, is for us to be able to move MTSS from the main office into our classrooms. And even with the principals saying that, the change in practice is challenging, right? So when we think about in secondary classrooms, there may be some fixed mindsets around how students should be, where students should be when they arrive, and whose responsibility is it to get that student to where they need to be in order for them to be successful. And those are the mindsets we're building. How do we meet our students where they are? How do we establish a sense of belonging so that they can engage in that community?
So what level of buy-in we're at?
I think it's different in different places. So across middle, it looks a little bit different because middle's smaller and a little more cohesive around grade level. So I can tell you, as a board, we have made great gains in the cohesion around our grade level teams in middle. So our sixth grade teachers coming together and working not only as content area teams, but sixth grade teams, so that they understand where Christine is as a sixth grader. At our high schools, it's been more challenging. We have large high schools, and figuring out where those students fit in our organization for support has been a challenge. But I think, you know, throw out random percentages, but I don't think that's helpful. I think that what's been going on is we've been leading training in partnership with Solution Tree around how our professional learning communities can play a part of our MTSS structures. We actually, a few years ago, began that work in earnest around forums and conversations with our teachers into place this year, universal supports across secondary in all buildings. So we've identified a set of universal supports. It was low hanging fruit. It's really not mind blowing things, but it is a set of supports that will allow all students to access certain things with teachers. So things like an academic resource center where students can have a quiet space to be able to take an assessment. That's now available in all of our secondary buildings to all students. You don't have to have a 504 to do it or an IEP to do it or parent permission to do it. You have a space to be able to go to. So I can't give you like an
That's okay.
indication,
Well,
but what
let
I
me
can
ask it a
say is there's
different way.
practices that are changing.
Let me ask it a different way. Are we at a point where teachers recognize that they want to own that they own those kids and they own the MTSS, and they just need to figure out how to do it? Or are you still at a stage where you're trying to convince them that they own all the kids and not just the kids who don't have an IEP? Like, so where do you think we're at mentally?
Yeah.
Are you getting any kind of ownership at least, even if they're not done training?
Yeah, there is growth, and there is the challenge that comes with changing a mindset or a paradigm. And so,
We're not there yet.
one of
Yeah,
the challenges.
I know. Well, never mind, you answered my
It's super
question,
important,
just
right?
the way
It's
you
super
answered it,
important to
so.
like be honest. I can
I
tell
want
you
you to
they're
be
all
honest,
great,
yeah,
but.
I know. No, I want you to be honest, that's what I'm trying to understand.
This year, one of our changes when we think about the work that was listed on a couple pages ago. When we think about the work that we're taking on to support our students with disabilities, a key piece of the work was we changed how achievement skills runs in our high schools and our middle schools. So our students with disabilities all have an achievement skills class
Right.
for who knows how long, because it was a pre-existing need. Achievement skills was used for task completion and homework help. So if I was a student with an IEP in specifically high school or especially high school, I would go to my achievement skills class and
Right.
receive homework help and task
My foster
completion.
son had that at
Right,
Larson.
in order to
Yeah.
stay afloat in my other classes. That achievement skills class was not remediating my area of need in order for me to perform better in reading or writing or math or whatever my need is. We have moved our focus to being on supporting students' academic needs in our achievement skills classes. And in doing so, there's not a lot of space for task completion and homework help.
Right.
So, it's a long story for me to say, but we still have teachers who might say, Christine is missing 6 assignments in health class. She's failing health. Carl, as her special ed teacher, I need you to make
get
sure
those
she gets
done.
those done or she's gonna fail health. And then the special educator may be saying back, well, Christine has some goals that we're working on in reading comprehension, and that's what she's spending her time on.
Right.
And now
Not
there's-
doing your homework.
Right, so now there's frustration, right? So we are working really hard on how we change our mindsets around that to ensure that our special educators don't feel stuck in the middle.
Right.
To ensure that our classroom teachers,
Well, that's
like
why I'm
our health
asking,
teachers,
because if
feel
you
that they
don't
have
get the
other
buy-
supports, right? Like,
If you don't get the buy-in from
Right.
your primary teachers, then all of it gets
Right.
dumped onto the special ed teacher who's coffee, food, and rock.
And that's the chiefs that we're moving right now, especially at the high school level, and it's extremely
It's a
challenging.
very protective piece of cheese.
And it's gonna take some, it's
Yeah.
gonna take some time, but we're seeing movement. And action changes attitude, right? We have to get people to act differently in order to change attitudes
Right.
around that.
So then my last question on this is, have we reached an agreement with the union that the extra time that we allotted in the contract is going to be used for us to do professional learning, and, or are they still saying that's their time to do whatever they want? Where are we at?
Are we talking
Little
about
bit
the
of
extra
both.
time after school?
Yeah, but what I would say is.
The extra minutes that we negotiated very
Yeah,
differently.
but what I would say is we have established with them structured times, a couple of days a week, where we are doing professional. PLC.
Okay.
That is dedicated, and then there are a couple of days a week.
That's okay, but that's movement from what we
That's
have been seeing,
movement.
which is, we're not gonna use this for professional development.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
we've at least got them to a point where they're willing to use some of the time
That's right.
for professional development.
That's right, and we have contract language to back it up.
Okay, thank you.
and I think one of the
Because
celebrations.
that, to me, that's key, right? How do you move this stuff if you never get to meet and learn, you know?
Right, and some of the celebrations is the incredible stuff that's coming from the collaborative time, where the teachers are coming together and developing supports for students.
Sure.
They're working smarter because they have time together
Right.
to be able
Which is where we've been able to do that at the elementary level for several years now, right? We know it works. So it's just trying to get the secondary to do it. So, okay, thank you.
Another chart.
Sorry.
So this represents our first glance at our formative assessment, which is what all students get at what we call universal screener. This is another layer of assessment, so we're able to see, as teachers get this 3 times per year. We've seen this before, and we've been able to attend our buildings and glance at how teachers use the universal screeners. This is ignore kindergarten, which is represented as grade 0. We're there.
Yes, they are.
But really, again, those individualized plans, again, first and second graders do not take an MSTEP or a standardized test. And so we're looking at ways that each of those kids in red will have an individualized reading plan that they work with. That's what the teachers do during that time together to develop plans for those students. And so
Is this different cohorts or the same cohort over 5 years, 6 years?
it's different cohorts.
Different
It's just
cohorts,
a
okay.
this
Yeah.
fall data,
Okay.
yeah.
I have a question, please, on this. For the first graders, do you think of the almost 25%, what percentage of them probably had kindergarten or preschool versus not? Or, I guess it may be hard to.
90% of our kindergarten class now has it, so.
So they're all.
But I would remember when we had that analysis, though, that's a good question. A lot of the times we noticed that students who had preschool had a higher reading level, and students who didn't, sometimes that can be the cost per gap. But this really speaks to the importance of early intervention for us. So you can see kind of that triangle kind of going the way, the number trending down as they get to 5th grade. Obviously, these are different students.
Right.
This is a good indicator for us that we are able to see, again, develop those individualized plans and really a celebration that we have 70 to 80% of our kids reading at grade level when they come to us. And the number of advanced level readers is really tremendous. So
What is our language learner percentage?
around 15, well, about 20, it depends on the building. This is a district-wide plan, and so each building has a breakdown by Morris is continuing to be our highest population. So.
But I'm just saying, if we have a bunch of first graders that English isn't their first language,
Right.
that's
Sure.
gonna.
All
And we
those
know that
factors.
goes down over time, right?
Yeah, because they get that,
So-
they get more language proficient.
Exactly, yeah.
Yep.
That's probably a significant part of it.
Is that, is that a goal, like if you see spring testing, that 25% down to almost zero?
Yep.
It would be nice to, yeah.
Our goal is to make sure that every one of those kids has adequate progress.
Right.
They're accelerating their progress over time. And so we have a middle portion too. We have our window coming up in December. And so then we'll take that 3 times per year.
So you do it 3 times per year?
Yep,
Yep.
to monitor that progress, especially for the. Math, our benchmark, these are, again, another example of formative assessments. These are created by our teachers, and it's important that our staff, this was created, I think 3 years ago when we did our math overhaul of the elementary school. And this is again ways that our students, all those students in the red have an individualized math plan as well. And they're able to work with sometimes that intervention is delivered by the teacher, sometimes it's with the math specialist, but tremendous amount of work that's happening with our group here.
What do we use to measure the math benchmark?
The teacher created assessments.
Oh, it's a teacher.
So I know that for 6, 7, 8, and even 9, we're using that WDA. Is that something that's also available for the elementary?
It is available.
Okay, so is that something that you?
We haven't used it in the past, we've used formative assessments, and we haven't used that as the district in the past.
Wait, so for 3rd grade, we have summative assessment also, right? We have. So do the teachers create their task for this, or create their assessment for this to match up with that?
Yep, they're all based on grade level standards, so if the teacher takes a glance at this, they can see those standards where the students are progressing and where they're not.
Versus for 2 and earlier, it doesn't have that. I mean, we still
We
have
have
grade level teaching, but
expectations at other points too, but we don't have that same assessments. Right.
I'm just curious, how does this Versus some stuff,
data.
yeah.
I would say that these are fairly well, I mean, again, they're aligned, but we can look at the step data and see the differences there. So it's trying to make sure that those, the idea is when teachers are grading those assessment, or those standards are, again,
Very similar.
those are also, the math piece is also given 3 times a year. This is just a quick glance. This is a looking at an elementary benchmark that is for a math recovery student. So some of our students that would be in red, for instance, the students that would have a plan. A lot of times their progress, they
No
may
idea.
still
Yeah, me too.
not be
I laughed at
proficient.
this, I
I
have
looked
no
at
idea what
there,
I'm
I
looking
was
at.
like, let's wait
I
it.
don't know what the numbers are, I laughed when I looked
You
at
can
it.
keep laughing, because the bottom line is
Like,
that
what
we're
are
trying.
What's good, what's bad, what's RNWS?
So those are examples of the standards. So those are this is what our math recovery, it's a foreign language to all of us, but our math recovery, what they wanted to share with our teaching and learning teams putting this together, is to show you that a student that is in red in benchmark assessment, that they created, these kids get taken for the math recovery math specialist, and they are making progress over time. See those 4 colors are representative of assessments that are given by the teacher. So you might see both on that seal assessment, and the teacher is targeting those standards to improve the student progress. So that diagnostic is about where the student was and where they're working to go. And those next steps are continually kind of
So the next
So that's the test they took on the March, then April,
Correct.
then May, and then September. So if they,
So while they may not be making the progress, they're not moving from red to yellow, for instance, they're still making that progress over time. So
And the x-axis is just different types of tests.
standards, right?
So
Standards
So
are tests.
proficient is 5 then?
Proficient is 5.
So whatever the B and WS is, we're not doing good. We're at 3 all the time.
Yeah, so
Good
how can we
idea as well, I'm not showing any improvement.
But again, the
Yes, so
idea
the
is that you're digging in
Yeah.
further
Okay.
and zeroing in even further on those standards to make sure that the students are, again, showing those individual standards at the time.
well, it looks like they only just now are testing the CDB, like it's pretty good, so.
She's targeting those foundations and those standards there, so. This was just to kind of share this at a glance. This is a student level class sample. So if you're looking at this as a teacher, you can see in this class that 15, if you look where it says fall F&P summary, 15 of those students are advanced. 4 of them are at grade level and 3 of them are below. And so this teacher, I think it's important sometimes to look at this as from my point of view, I like looking at this at the teacher level to know what, if there's an imbalance, for example, those students in red are students that the teacher is required to monitor. Obviously, we monitor all of our students, but to make sure that you're monitoring those reading plans and looking at their progress over time. And it's a nice glance at all of the assessments at once. So if you follow just the columns, there's the math benchmark, there's the you go to the kind of the fall, winter, spring, and you're able to also see, which we don't have indicated on here, their behavior data as well. We have what's called an SSRS, where there's a screening of the students, kind of the teacher's able to fill out kind of worries about behaviors and pieces like that. So you're able to see at a glance where they are. Assessment schedules are indicated on here. A teacher's able to see at a glance if this child is special ed, guilty, and on or above grade level as mentioned. So lots of information in one space, but just wanted you to have a glance at how our staff is interacting with the data.
If a principal looked at this across the grade level, he's got 3 4th grade teachers, and one of them, that dark 3 is actually 14 or whatever, you know, like the principal can look and go, oh, I've got Chris is in trouble in room 14 because we just ended up with a mix of kids. Do we have any ability to surge support into that for that teacher? Is there?
Oh, sure. First of all, we don't. The principals spend hours of time balancing classrooms before this, like,
Okay.
you know, they look
So
at
we don't
that
see
balance
surprises
before.
because at the end of the previous year, we're making sure that makes
Yeah,
sense. Okay.
yeah, for the
Yeah.
most, there's not, but to your point, that's important to know that we have, you know, 5 language learners, 3 special
That's what I'm thinking
students,
before
yeah.
Chris loses her mind because she's got 5 language
Right.
learners and, you know, have 6 kids in reading recovery.
Yeah.
Like, do we have any ability to shuffle and provide extra support?
Yeah, that's the importance of kind of having this
I know it's
roundtable
a-
discussions
okay.
and when the ELD person is gonna call and when the special ed person might call, that kind of thing, to make sure that kind of they're divvying out those responsibilities.
So who uses, so do the teachers look at this with each other? Do they use it with, it's probably yes to all. Do they look at it with the principal? Do they
Yes,
look at it with the
yes,
ELT?
yes.
It's
Yeah,
all
we
the
have
same.
that built into our contract, that we have that at least 3 times per year. We actually have that daily common planning for teachers as well, so we have all sorts of time built in.
Thank you. Just because I can see where this would be very helpful if everybody was using it. It's at least, it's a good,
Yeah. Yep.
it's a good dashboard.
So the next few slides are not informative assessment for high school and middle schools. So this year we are implementing across, so last year we piloted with a few groups the NWA assessment. This year we're implementing the NWA assessment as a universal screener for all students in grades 6, 7, 8, and eligible 1. So we have given that assessment to those students one time. And so there's not an aggregate data piece for me to share with the board at this time. Our hope is to be able to share some of that in the spring after we're able to give a second session and also provide some updates on how we're doing with math, which I know we're committed to doing in the spring. But we did want to identify for you that we have taken on this work. We've also begun training our teachers around that data. Now that they've given the assessment and have it, we brought trainers back in at the end of October so that teachers could use their actual data to do some learning around. Our math specialists are using this data to be able to identify which students need further support, and they're pushing it into classrooms. So kind of Drew Latorre over at Baker, he has boots on the ground, right? He's got this spreadsheet where he's looking at how students are performing, and then he's knowing where they are in their standards in Math 7, and he's pushing into that classroom, and he knows how to support those students. So this is what the classroom level report looks like. So this is an example of an Algebra 1 classroom in 9th grade at Athens. And a teacher can see how a student's doing, what their grid score is in any one of these areas that they were assessed in. So you can see the different areas: geometry, operations and algebraic thinking, statistics and probability. Each one of these grid scores a teacher can drill into to see specifically what is a
Quantile, I was asking, quantile, never heard that term before.
So they can dig into what is assessed in those areas. Further, there are resources that are tied directly to grit scores that are available. So for instance, Khan Academy, not missing an opportunity to connect themselves. Khan Academy has connected their learning modules to grit scores. And so, because there's a variety of school districts across the country that use NWEA. So families can go in or teachers can go in to look at, okay, if I'm going to give an additional assessment or provide some additional learning at home, here's a place where I can go to be able to do that. And this is what we're going to be working from. So teachers have access to the NWA learning continuum so that they're able to build more supportive structures. The goal is also through this data to teach our secondary folks additional skills on how they might create smaller clusters in their classroom to provide direct instruction and intervention, that tier 2 that's happening in the classroom to support kids rather than kids having to get pulled out.
The idea with these reports and showing you what our teachers are doing is just to see it at a glance, kind of classroom view, I guess.
And the teachers, I assume, understand what the grid score means.
Right now, they'd probably say maybe.
Right? I mean, I'm just
Right.
it's like this is
The
a range of
range of
numbers that
Right.
are meaningless to us.
But that has a direct correlation to an area where you can drill down and then drill down again. So click here, you can learn about this is what was assessed. Click here, you learn about how can I better support that as a classroom teacher.
So I know one of the things that's cool about FNP is that our teacher administers the test, and so they're watching and understanding that child as they take the test. NWA, that's self-administered, right?
Correct.
I mean,
And so NWA is also a dynamic adaptive assessment. So it's a digital
Yeah, I know what that is.
dynamic assessment, right? So it goes back and forth to kind of find that right fit for students as they're taking it. And I mean, the nice
How long
part.
does it take for students to take it?
About 45 to 50 minutes, so one class period.
And just math.
In just.
It's just math, and then that's 2 times a year, or is that 3?
We did it 3 times a year in the pilot, and I'm not sure if we're doing it 3 times a year for all of our grade levels. That's a question.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
That's
Find out.
I'm not gonna go lean strongly on that. Two.
And then in ELA, we're using Common Lit as our assessment for students in their classrooms, and that's across our middle and into our high school as well. I think that this really provides a nice snapshot for teachers to be able to see where their students need support, but also see where they need to provide instruction right out of the gate. So if you look at, this is the classroom example of a Common Lit report. So for this, this is a 7th grade classroom, and these are all of the standards listed across the top. So for example, the first column where we have a lot of yellows and reds, this might be an area where we need to dig in our class. So at the beginning of the school year, again, 1 class period assessment, the teacher gets a feedback, the feedback that looks like this. They can say to themselves, okay, in this standard, and the standard that's listed here is to cite several pieces of textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly as well as what inferences are drawn. That's what RI 7.1 is. So that 7th grade teacher can say, okay, we've got one kiddo who's blown it out of the water, right? So I'm gonna be able to let that kid fly and maybe give him some additional enrichment or ways to apply this at a higher level. My other students need support across the board. Versus when we look at the 7.4, right? 7.4 is mostly greens, except for one student who's got a 60%, and that's in determining the meaning of simple idioms and figures of speech as they are used in text. That's what that means. So when I'm a classroom teacher, I can say, all right, as we go into our units this year, these are the things that are top of mind. These are the things I may just glance over because I know they got it. In addition, Common Lit has lessons that teachers can use. So they might be pulling small groups. So let's say I've already taught 7.1, and I'm like, oh boy, it's not working so well. I can go in there, I can find some supplemental units. I can also create small groups from that and have them use the units. And then another piece of Common Lit is we've invested in Common Lit's intervention. They have an intervention curriculum, and we're using the Common Lit intervention curriculum in our resource room classes for our special education students as additional time on learning in alignment with what's going on in curriculum. So it's become a very nice through line. They started looking at it about 2 years ago, so this is our 3rd year of implementation. And I think for teachers, it was a little overwhelming at first to figure out what to do with this, but now that they have it, I think it's been very useful for them. We've been working on the timing of when this assessment is given, because for some of our students who have semesterized classes in high school, one's the beginning, one's the end. Let's touch base on that. So we worked through that, I think, pretty well. We have to take it at the beginning and the end of first semester, and then at the end of second semester, because as soon as they come in to start second semester, they can access their feedback from the end of first semester. So.
A couple of questions. This Common Lit, is that a national use, kind of like FMLA?
It is. It's a formative assessment for purchase.
Okay.
So from an independent company.
And we're using that through our entire high school or middle and high school?
Middle and
The other question I have is that, so when they're assessing this, I'm assuming they take a certain piece of literature and then they do these things, but do they have a choice of this literature? Because some kids may be good at one that's of interest to them versus not good, and this is what we heard sometimes from our students. If the topic is of interest, they'll do a better job at doing it. Do we give them choice?
They don't have choice, but there's multiple passages that they get graded on, and then the aggregate score is used to give that feedback.
So hopefully those choices may have one or two of interest for them.
But just like a common, just like a summative assessment.
SAT or
Right.
something.
You have to power through learning about frogs.
I hate frogs.
Any other questions around formative assessment, kind of at that ending point? Great. We'll jump right into celebrations.
So again, last year we took a glance at this and we fixed up the chart, so it's just kind of easier to see the programming, so hopefully you're able to kind of just capture just a huge, again, point of celebration for the board to be able to see the growth in the preschool. Interestingly, we opened in 2021, so kept our doors open for those folks there, but obviously you can see the growth over time and how basis for our universal opportunities in terms of business. So exciting times ahead with that, and lots of wonderful opportunities for us.
We wanted to celebrate the International Academy East and looking at their IB diploma acquisition. We talked a little bit last year about how we had an interesting little blip in the screen for them with a 72% acquisition, and they're back up at 81. So Patrick and Gabby were feeling very positive about that. The collaboration-wide, all three campuses, their average was 85%. So IACE is a little bit lower than the total aggregate for the three campuses, the tri-campus model. But again, moving forward in a very positive direction.
Did we even understand what was the reason for that list?
We did not, I do not have an answer to that. I know that Gabby and Patrick they spent quite a bit of time going into this year talking about the importance of their external assessments with their staff. And so the staff going into last year, once they had the 72%, recognizing that they needed to just make sure they were overemphasizing with the students the importance of all of the assessments that prepare the assessments that precede their final assessment, that prepare them to be ready for that. So, and they emphasize that, and I think they're very happy with, because they felt like we made a concerted effort to be able to.
I don't know, is it teaching to the test, or is it more saying, because this is done after their graduation is done, a lot of people lose interest, kids lose interest in the test, is that right?
No, I think that what they were working on is, the significant difference between IB and AP is that IB is really more focused on application, and it's on problem solving, and it's the philosophy in the IB curriculum is how do you approach an unknown yet familiar challenge. So they give them something that's unknown yet familiar that they're able to navigate through. So all of the external assessments that lead up to their final assessment prepare them in the experience, and then they're more prepared. Obviously, we know, even when it applied to the SAT, if you take multiple practice SATs, then you understand what that feels like, and you're more prepared to be your best self. And so that was a key component of what they were looking at. Okay. A lot to celebrate here on our AP Honor Roll scores. So this is a combination of last year and this year in data, because I thought it was really important to put them next to each other so you could see the celebration that was there. So if we look across the first row for, first of all, for Athens and for Troy High, Athens moved from silver to gold status in the AP Honor Roll, which is wonderful. When we look at the college culture, which is that row underneath, college culture talks about the percentage of the graduating class who took an AP exam at any point in high school, regardless of their score. So if we think for a minute and look at those numbers, 70% of our graduating class at Athens and 75% of our graduating class at Troy High School took an AP exam when they were students at our building. That's incredible. That's an incredible number for our students to have access to be able to try those tests. We know that the College Board tells us that students' participation in AP courses, even when it's one, improves their outcomes in college. And then the next row that's there, the percent of students in the graduating class who scored a 3 or higher on any of their AP exams in high school. So again, I think if we look at that, I know that one of the questions that was asked before the presentation was just how are the kids doing once they're in those APs. So we can see that 58% of those, at Athens and 67% at Troy High were scoring 3 or higher in those assessments. And then the last one, the college optimization, looks at the percent of students in the graduating class who took 5 or more, but at least 1 in 9th or 10th grade, so that they could spread the burden or the load over the 4 years that they're there. And that's about a quarter to 30% of our graduating class who's doing that. So we have a high level of students who are taking APs in our district. That's not new news. But we continue to celebrate access for our students as that continues to grow. The next slide piggybacks on our AP and talks a little bit about, Nicole gave a nod to this earlier in our conversation. We're seeing our increase in enrollment in our AP ELA classes going into this year, so that's exciting for us. We have a little over 400 students who are current 11th graders who have chosen to take AP 11. There were no prerequisites 11th grade will be the students who have gone all in within the 9th grade curriculum and all in within the 10th grade curriculum. What's left to be told is how these 42% of kids do on the assessment, so that's kind of the next question. So we've talked often as a district that it's not just about enrollment and access, but it's also about how our students are prepared and performing. So we want to make sure that we have a balance in that.
So between 23 and 24 and then 25, I guess, next year. So we'll look at how many students enrolled in AP 11. What assessment are we looking at to see what the difference is?
So we can see their AP, we can see their AP test scores, and we can also look at, I mean, this is an 11th grade, so we can also look at the SAT scores.
The it is right, we have more like graders this year than in 2020.
Yes.
I have a number showing this.
Yes,
you have
so there are low numbers are coming into their
Kindergartners, yeah.
well, they're in like 4th and 5th grade, and they're coming to the middle school, and then they'll look at it. Our seal of biliteracy is an area we wanted to celebrate. Our numbers are not huge if you look at it, the far right side, but we are providing students with access to the seal of biliteracy. It's something that goes on your diploma that indicates really your dual biliteracy, your dual language. I think one of the challenges for our students is, for many of them, it's something that's, you know, get it and take your diploma, so it's after college, acceptances is after, so there's a little less interest in this, but it is something I think that's very useful when you're talking about employment and you're looking at college and university.
Do you know how many students in the state got that?
How many students in the state of Michigan?
Yeah, because if you look at like our national merit semifinalists, we represent 2% of the students, but we represent 13.5% of the national merit semifinalists in the state. This might be the same thing.
Yeah, we did look at the numbers against some districts that have larger populations like ours, and Dearborn's is far greater.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Is there,
And this is
is there-
You just needed awareness.
Yeah, okay. I just was curious.
And it's not a competitive component, it's really just going through the process and then satisfying.
So we talked about how we can advertise this more. Families
Sure,
may not be
yeah.
aware of it. How do we advertise it more so families can make the determination whether they want to?
And the question I have too is, if I recall, this was, you do this in your junior year. You go through the process in your junior year.
You can do it anytime.
I thought it was your
So-
junior year.
Any year.
What I'm realizing, noticing is the ones who have what's called heritage language, as in like, you know, native language of their parents, is something that a lot of them like go to Chinese school, Hindi school, any of the Indian language schools, they will be ready to test this out in middle school, because most of them, yet we don't do those assessments until later, and it doesn't show up in the course. I've talked to many who run those schools who kind of want to administer this in middle school itself and have the kids be done with it and move on to other things in high school.
Okay?
Yeah, if it doesn't work, let's give them a
Take advantage of it.
give them a
If
line.
they go, they're gonna pass them, right on an application.
Yeah, sure.
One of my favorite slides is the next slide. So this is our Troy College and Career 4-year graduation rate. Last year we graduated the largest class, and I think it's an amazing chart, and just really tells the story. And Angela and I had a lot of fun talking to others in the alt ed world about how you can get there and what steps you might be able to take and what's really needed in order to get there. And a big part of how this school has been able to evolve is the confidence that the board has put in us allowing to change things there, and giving flexibility to the program and being are still exceeding the Michigan State requirements for a diploma. And so, you know, because there's like a careers requirement, there's other requirements that we have, and I think you as a board should be very proud of that work and your recognition that when students need different things, we can still hold them to high expectations, but find ways to get them there. And so I think this is a great celebration of that dedication. And then this is a new slide for us. We didn't talk about this last time, but we've had different conversations. More than 290 of our seniors from the class of 2024 earned completer status in one of our many CTE courses. So completer status is like the full program. So if you are in marketing, it's not you're just taking intro to marketing. You're taking marketing and then the advanced marketing, and you're going through the full CTE program as designed and designated by the state. And so 290 of our students, that's I think a pretty significant number, probably more than I would bet most of you thought.
That's I mean, that's like more than a third.
Yep, it's about a third. Yeah, it's about a third of our students.
So how many classes does it take to get finished one computer program?
Some of them are different, but if they're at least 4 semesters, minimum of 4 semesters or 2 years, but some of them have more than that, depending on what it looks like. So like for our automotive students, they take a year and then a 2-year block. So they go through that different, it's just dependent upon what they have to be able to do to accomplish those things. So we're really excited about that. Mike is doing a really great job of focusing on this work and helping to see it through and working to support these teachers as we grow these programs. So it's been really great.
It just says that way, I had CTE on our work plan for March. So we'll bring back up to speed because we've added some new classes and so we'll bring that back for March.
Yeah.
Program update.
Any more slides, would you like to see more?
Thank you.
No more, thank you so much.
All right.
It's long, but it's a good conversation. I think it's a good conversation. Thank you. Okay, so that takes us to other.
Can we take like
No, can we have 1 minute?
If I'm gonna do that, I'm sorry. No. She's mad at it. Yeah, I mean, I've read it. See it, but that's one of you guys want. I don't know. But, yeah. Yeah. No, it just makes no sense when you're Well, I think. It's worthwhile. I just don't think it doesn't make sense to. Yeah, I know it's not. I don't think it's toxic. We're not required to try to self-pay.
Spending it in WhatsApp.
So walking through it, walk through it, and then say at the end of the year, oh.
You mentioned that you're trying to come. My dad always learned just a lot of commerce, because we inherited from something that they owned a grocery store in Old Town in the 20s. And this is the last descendant. It just doesn't. He passed away a couple of years ago. And he keeps threatening to build it outside because he's like, I'm not passing it. I'm like, what do you don't spend any money on that? But it'll tell you, so I told him, I'm like, I don't mean to like be mean, but he's 70 years old, and I know how particular some are about fees, and I know the way contractors are, and I know how skeptical in general of you are of people. You will not do not do this. So he's helped us so far. Yeah, he has this crazy idea, like there's that Huron something that's like, oh, it'll be residents or something. I'm like, no, you're gonna put, first of all, there's lots there. So, and he just likes, yeah, it's, I think he knows the project. He lives in that project, I think he was program manager at John. So that's just project, it's like breathing air. But something to
Yeah. I just said,
unbelievable. Do you think I thought my dad didn't say that it was unbelievable?
So it's really just the three things. Okay. Okay, so under other, Nancy can't make the January 17th. She was hoping to move the workshop to January 14th, so the question is, can we do January 14th?
It's the following Monday.
It's a Monday.
Yeah, it's a Monday.
It's the Monday after the 14th.
It's the third Monday in the month, so.
So that's it, yes. So usually that's it, yes. That we have. Okay, go back to other.
Thank you.
Anything?
What do you mean? Okay. So I won't go through all of it, but I have, two items. One, I'd asked ahead of time what our timeline look like for food services. I know at MASB, quite a few of us went to lots of different vendors. So what is our,
I'm gonna give this for February.
okay, what is the contract of?
June, so we have until June. I mean, contract is up in June.
We'll start
Right,
in
but-
February.
That's when you're gonna put out for bid?
Then typically you start assessing at that point whether you're gonna do an extension or not. Because then you have to turn it into the state by April.
So early February gives us a sample. If you want to do it in January, do it in
I
January.
think the consensus is we need better food. And I have to say, when we were at MASB, we went to the best food chart Roll had to offer at MASB, and it was
Neither
not
of
that,
us
it
could
was
have
not
been
that great. But
There
yeah.
was too much bacon.
Well, not just that.
It
For
just,
these
it was
two people,
not,
there was
but
too much
in
bacon.
any
There
case,
was
I
bacon
think
in
there's,
everything.
I think there's still some grumblings amongst students. So, okay.
I think February, I mean, if you prefer to move it to January, we can move it to January, the conversation to January.
I would move the conversation to January because I don't know, we moved it last year to give us a year, and I feel like if we talk about it in February, it's gonna be like, well, you know,
Too late.
it's too late, and then we'll do another year. And I
I'm saying
think-
we can do it like
Yeah.
that, but, you know.
That's
I
when
think
you
you-
would bid it out, but the conversation would start.
Yeah.
In January,
All right,
yeah.
I will move that to January.
You can inform our committee to,
Yeah. And then the second, and I alluded to it earlier, was busing and start school times, So, I know for years, you know, the board made a decision 4 or 5 years ago before Matt and I came on the board. And so the 2 years that we've been on the board, it's been, you know, there's not enough bus drivers, so that's it. But at what point do we have a conversation with, okay, this is what, we've made the decision to do, this is what we wanna do, so let's figure out how we're gonna do it. So, you know, and whether that's gonna involve maybe having a, you know, an outside source come in to do some type of route assessment, you know, look at our entire system that's not coming from our current, you know, transportation provider. So, you had mentioned that you guys had talked about.
Yeah, we met with First Student earlier, just to, that was the first time I got to meet the representative that we work with. That topic came up where he had
We have 30, this is nothing. But I had a conversation with METS, quite an extensive conversation there, and they were willing to come in and recruit those drivers for us, even if they don't have a contract. Because they saw that as an opportunity to potentially steal the contract later on. But they were willing to, they said that they have a different way of recruiting, and they sort of hold the hands of applicants, and they were quite eager to be given an opportunity to help us with that help, even if we stick with first student. So that's one, if they could do it, that's the simplest solution. The second option is what you're describing, which is, do we bring in a logistics company to look at the routing and say, is there somebody other than first student we can ask to come in and see if, get some fresh brains on this, going, okay, if this is what we have, this is what we can work with, how close can we get to what we want?
Yeah, I would venture down that road of routing. I think there's a lot of advanced algorithms that I think there are out there on the market that you could have loaded in to really assess, are you truly doing the most efficient routes? And, I mean,
Supposedly, first student has done that, so.
But we
don't-
disagree.
Yeah.
Anecdotally,
It's hard to disagree when your buses start on a minute and end on a minute and don't have time in between.
Well, that's why I thought this was a possibility.
So I have no problem at all with us doing that, with us bringing in a third party. If that will help give put fresh eyes on the challenge that we face, then it's time to do that, so.
I mean, I would be more depressed that there's not, and I know even last year we talked about, we're in a 5-tier system. There's the possibility to go to a 4-tier system, which is less burdensome than going to a 3-tier system. But there has to be
The freedom is in the three-tier system.
some things like the food, the food services last year, we just punted off to the following year because, there was other things. So I think at some point, we're either gonna really take a look at the start times and figure out how to make that happen. Or then we just need to completely abandon the idea, but.
So we'll work, what is this one?
METS, because I'm going to hand it to
You're
you.
gonna have to outside. So we'll do, Dan and I will talk about how we can connect with a third party to bring them in and do a review. And bring back some alternatives. Right now, your best alternatives is flip middle school and high school ones. That is our best, that is probably the under the current system, assuming there is no more efficient system,
Or we can't get more drivers.
or we can't get more drivers, your best bet is to flip middle school and high school, because nobody's gonna be okay with flipping elementary and high school. I should say that. I doubt that our community would go for having elementary students at bus stops at 6:30, 45.
Since you're,
Maybe again, ask, but
since you're looking at the middle school attendance area more, does that have any impact on the bus and run productivity?
if anything, it's gonna make it more challenging as we transition.
Okay, so I think, and I don't know who an outside vendor to look at the system would be, but that's for you guys.
Yeah, there's organizations, the ISD, we can reach out and ask for some recommendations for some companies, but I think it's fair to always look at your routes and make sure you have the most efficient route out there.
Okay, and then the last thing is, are we gonna continue the discussion on technology and cell phones?
Yes.
And when are we gonna pick that back up?
I have, I had technology, our technology committee, an update from our Dan is will be updating our technology committee. He'll be starting that, we'll be kicking that off in January. So
Okay.
we'll get the group together and we're gonna kick that off in January. So I initially had that, I had that on February as a conversation.
To continue, yes.
That's a placeholder for conversation.
Okay, so
Does that work?
that's your administration committee, because I'm not, as a board member, I'm
You would be the
supposed to be
representative
on
on
it.
that committee, correct? Yes.
We also had our community conversation that will continue in
Yeah,
January.
we'll
to know what have we done with the community, what work has been done at the administrative level, at the schools. And then we can also give our, feedback, because there's always new information coming out. At MASB, I attended, there was a cell phone session. So, okay, that's February.
February works. How many parents did we have at that night?
We had about 100 sign up, but we had 60.
60, okay, so that's right. I thought we were around 60 when I was looking around the
That's
phone.
okay.
Yeah.
It was great conversations.
Yeah,
People
sure
were- It
was.
was a really good night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everything else next time.
I have nothing further at this time.
Okay.
So I have one school-related thing, and then I have a few items from the MASB, the annual leadership conference. I've been approached by a couple of IAE students, and apparently they put together some kind of a sign-up to have holidays represented, like Diwali and Eid, in their calendar, and I don't know who they submitted that sign-up to, and I don't know what is happening. I just wanted to try and get an update, maybe on it.
That's, I think, great information. They should be submitting that to Mr. Griffin as we go through, and John can speak
Yeah,
more to
they
this.
sent that to me.
Oh,
Is it
perfect.
that you?
And I responded to them that the timing is right, that we are starting tomorrow, the conversation, John will be a part of that conversation, as will Patrick. We'll be starting the negotiation for the calendar, or for the consortium agreement. And it will include calendar. And so that will be the opportunity for us to insert that into the conversation as part of the tri-campus. So I responded to the students that they could share that information with their classmates, so that is going to take place.
Okay.
I can't guarantee where it's going to go.
Well, that's all we can do. We can get-
It's being inserted into the machine.
Does, the consortium, you have your own meetings, right?
Correct.
Does it help if any of us come or represent, or no? You're representing already the district, so you're good.
I know where the will of the board is, and quite frankly, I know where the will of our community is.
Okay.
With respect to that, the work that we did with our calendar is evident. The response we've received from the community with respect to the work that was done on the calendar is evidence that
We did the right thing.
We did the right thing, and it would make sense that our students at IAEs could take advantage of those opportunities as well, so.
I appreciate it because apparently Patrick Griffin had let them know that they could take an optional day off if they celebrate the holiday. And several kids have taken advantage of that. I don't know if that means that they had tests or anything like that, because they were like 30% of the class was absent for Diwali because we knew that
They had
we could
72%.
take off. Huh?
They had 72% in attendance.
See, yeah, 30% of the classes,
You're correct.
close to 30%, I guess.
You're correct.
So something like that, they said, okay. From the MASB conference, and I don't know if we need to go through it, or we want to just send it out.
I don't know how.
I didn't even include those.
Only three items I have here, is one is about the cell phone use or technology use. Mina and I attended one session where there was 3 districts. One was from Grand Rapids, one was from Farmington, and another one is, I don't remember the third one. 3 of them presented
Traverse
together.
City.
Traverse City, yes, okay. They all had completely different approaches. One was the teachers or the staff reached out to the district and they said, we really want to implement this. And the other one was the board all the way from top had wanted a way of implementation. And the third one was like a combined community and all of that. And all of them had their own advantages and disadvantages. For the most part, it was like no cell phones in elementary at all, no cell phones in middle school during the school time. And in high school, they are allowed cell phones, but during passing time, some of them had like the sleeves. There were discussions about those sleeves are being useless. Kids bring dummy phones and leave that in their sleeve and then use their real phones anyway, kind of thing. So there's a whole lot of discussions about those. So, but overall, though, the community was completely supportive. All 3 communities. There was like no outcry that their kids are not allowed to use the cell phones or whatever is what they said. just a few like health issues and whatever, and we could make exceptions for kids who have health issues. So some information on that we can take on. And I know we did the community read, which is a great thing. I think we are bringing the community on board with us as we are going forward. The other session I attended was on esports actually, and I want to understand where we stand in our esports, because something that I've heard from that is that there's a, we engage a set of kids that are otherwise unengaged or not engaged with those type of events, and it would be nice to know if we do any sports, if we are doing what it is that we do, and how we are doing it.
Yeah, I attended that session as well, and that was one, I attended it because when I started it, last year, seeing that it was showing up as clubs at the middle schools, I was like, oh, now, kids playing more video games, and so I challenged myself to go to that session. I was actually, really impressed by what it offers to kids and how many new kids it brings into, a group type activity that otherwise don't participate. So yeah, maybe if we could get an update at one of the meetings.
The other session was a session about teachers, talent together, or something like that. Is that the name of the group that they do, where they actually train teachers or bring teachers who are either their second career or other people who might otherwise not have the money to become teachers or whatever, and pay for them and then require them to teach in the district for a few years or something like that. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And he said one of our teachers have come out through that program.
That's right.
Yeah.
And more in the hopper.
More in the upper, yeah. It sounded really interesting, and it's all state funded, so hopefully, and they said the funding is proportional to the size of the district and the size of the students, so maybe we can take advantage of that. And then the other last one is just a quick update, if I can get, on the dual college thing with the Lawrence Tech, how we are doing, for maybe a future day. That would be good.
Yeah. Kendra, can we ask the schools to not put QR codes on the websites? Cause like for Athens to pay for an AP exam, we got I had to dig through like multiple levels of the website to then just get a QR code, which then meant I had to use my phone, and then I had to put credit card information in on my phone, and I just wanted to click on a link and pay for the AP.
Probably do both.
They don't, there was no.
No, so she's
They probably can do both.
Yeah, like I just, but I'm
I've
like,
noticed the QR codes and even in the weekly newsletters, like, does this mean that I now have to take out my, like for the basketball game?
and so it's
Which might
just,
be nice.
and especially, I was just laughing because like I had to do the article about not scanning QR codes, and then everything I had to pay for was through a QR code, and I was like, this is kind of contradictory. So if we could just like make sure that if it's something you have to pay, that there's a link. Because if you're already on your computer, it's really frustrating to then have to go take a picture of a QR code instead of just using your.
The follow-up for that with security reasons, if the QR code shows you what link it's going to send it to, it is more secure, because most of the QR codes don't show you, and that's when it's a security risk.
Well, I'm more just annoyed than the security, but it was kind of ironic to me that I was like, oh, don't use QR codes, and then I have to do QR cards for money. Like, I was like, it's, so, and then, I know you said that the AP thing is moving, so I just.
Christina Maria have met with the teachers, and so they're working on a plan.
Okay, because I think it's really important, especially when we look at like the discrepancy in test scores, that the kids who are high achieving have as much opportunity to pursue those things. And I really, really don't want I know of kids who have done summer school or done things at OCC, and so I'm like, I don't want us to lose our student body because they're not having opportunities to be successful. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention, I went to multiple sessions at MSBA, but the one that I think was most interesting to me that I think we could really benefit from is the one that was on restorative practices. So, there is a school district in Dearborn, it's Crestwood in Dearborn. And the way that they do restorative practices is really inspirational, and it's not just,
Voluntary.
it's,
and
but
it's
it,
not.
yeah, and it was also like, they built it into their school culture, the way that they do restorative practices, and they've restructured, I think, the way that their administration operates, and they have a restorative practices person in every building that is like part of the administration team and also part of the counseling team. And so it opened up kind of conversations, and I know we've talked about like ways to revamp counseling. And so like, would it make sense to have, you know, a person or two people on the counseling staff that are more like parapros who do the computer work of counseling, so that your counselors are actually like working with kids and then having them be trained in restorative practices. But they had like Chantel's role in their district is, and I know Chantel is a restorative practices person. But just the way that they did it, they might be a great district for you to talk to, because they had
They'd be well worth a field trip.
they were,
They were a wonderful group of people.
it wasn't just, it was like a philosophy, a way of being, it was embedded into everything that they did, and it was just really inspiring, so. Rashid, he was amazing.
Yeah.
So, I was sitting with Rashid, and I was like, I wanna hire Rashid.
And they use restorative practices within staff as well.
They do, that's how they do all their
It's from
staff.
top to bottom, but it's very interesting because even the presenters were laughing about when one of the presenters had to go in a restorative circle with someone she couldn't stand. And then when they managed to work their differences out and work, and she was laughing away, that's when she kind of became a believer, because it allowed her to function well with this other person.
Yeah. And then I had said that was my last thing, because that's the last pot. And then, have we had any incidents of swatting here? Because when we were at MASB, like, I was sitting, I kept hearing districts that were having.
But had any of it?
No, but Todd's been doing an incredible job because of his connections with SEC and then also across the state. When they find out that there's attempts that are being made in the state of Michigan, we alert all of our administrators to those attempts. So with details on, here's what we know, here's what might happen, here's what we need you to do. And we've been working through a form to collect a consistent form. So if someone answers the phone and something starts to happen like that, like how to keep that information so that we can start to chart that and understand what it looks like. So we've taken some steps to try to protect ourselves and inform our people. And Todd's really been essential in that. He brings that information to our team right away, and then Chris and I are able to disseminate it to our principals.
Okay, that's it, because some of the people that I was sitting with one of the trainings, I was like, oh my, the horror that it is creating in their district is,
Yeah.
just, yeah. So, all right,
That's it?
that's, now,
Okay. Matt's, I talked about, that's the bus company, Microsoft Copilot privacy issue. I'm going to hand this to you so you got it. And then MASB training for our new folks. So we think we're going to have training before the end of the
Julie
year.
is working with them.
Okay, all right, good. And there are other, for our new folks there in the corner there, if you can't do the training that we're doing in January for MASB, there's the Winter Institute. If you go to MASB and look, you can, if you want to torture yourself, you can get through half of the first year requirements within 2 days, and that's the weekend of February 7th and 8th. But in order for the board to maintain its honor board status, just a reminder to everybody, it was June 30th. Yeah, so the goal is to have the 10 courses done by June 30th, is what you need to be able to do. And almost all of them you can do online, between December and February, my goal is to kill them all off. So just something to keep in mind. And Judy will help you with that. FFSC, they were the ones that I was all excited about, and then they flaked out on us, and then they were there again, all excited again, and I talked to them again, so who knows. And then I've got a stack of questions, just things to check on that came out of the Michigan Council of School Attorneys Fall Conference. That was at MASB. I don't have to read them through with everybody here. I'm going to leave that with you. If I try to kind of spell it out to see if it's really just things that they were saying, make sure your policy does this or covers that. But if you have any questions, obviously just call me. But I have a copy of this too, so if you look at it, I don't know what you mean, I can explain it to you, but we don't have to all sit through that, but I wanted to make sure you have that. And then I'll chair the meeting next week. I'm not gonna be here for the workshop or the meeting in December. You guys can figure out if you want it, you're gonna do the self-evaluation, in the workshop. And Rich was saying, you know, do you wanna do the self-evaluation? Do you wanna wait and take the new folks through the self-evaluation in January and then agree to do that, like skip a year and then do it next year? Or do you think it's worth going through the exercise, you know, with the four of you and kind of looking back over the year and then sort of then bringing the new folks up to speed in January with it? So it's really up to the four
So
of you.
I would,
Or five of you, I don't, Gary, I don't know what your plan is.
my opinion, and we don't have to do this, we as a board are gonna change so much that I would say probably just go through it in January and then, you know, wait a year.
Okay.
Because now, it's like the next step, we're gonna be looking at the past.
Yeah,
year,
no,
the
I
next
agree.
year.
Yeah, you know,
It's gonna look so
but,
different.
you know, our sense was when the two of us were
Yeah.
talking here was that, you know, it doesn't make sense for us to do self-evaluation on a
Yeah.
position we're not gonna be in.
Yeah,
You know, we can't change the behaviors of the following year. Okay.
You go with the table.
Yeah.
I also think doing it in January doesn't make much sense also, because there's going to be 3 new folks.
So it's
and one new-
to lay
Just
out
to say
what
what
your
it
goals
is.
are, so that you
Oh,
yeah.
read it,
It's-
you read it,
Yeah,
so that you
they
say,
can
this is what we will.
And that's
do."
helpful to your new members to understand this is how we're gonna
To
evaluate
lay out
ourselves
goals.
and
Okay.
whether we've done a good job.
and then we
writing
do
it.
it,
makes
and then we
sense.
do it in
That makes
December of
sense.
Yeah,
25.
and then that gives the new folks a chance to read the governance core. They can read the book that goes along with the tools, so they'll be able to.
Yeah,
use that.
that's,
Nancy,
yeah,
I said the same thing, she's
Yeah.
comfortable with waiting, so. Okay.
yeah. The last item in our workshop in January